Hello and welcome to folks in the chat and those on the VOD. That's right, welcome to another edition of Shintigercurl Streaming. This is your extremely grateful host, Mr. Shintigercurl. How's everybody doing? All right, I saw Mike Shell in the chat. I saw Card Junkie in the chat. I see Brother Ball in the chat. How's it going? I also see, of course, Devil. What's going on, guys? So, another day, another time for us to progress the story of New World. But of course, you all know what we got to do before that. So get out your guns, lock and load, because it's time to shoot the shit. And of course, thank you, Brother Ball, for bringing it up. The fact that today is the birthday of one of the greatest factions in pro wrestling history. That's right, today is the birthday for the Bullet Club. On this day so many years ago, Prince Devitt, aka Finn Balor, alongside Bad Luck Fale, would go on to found one of the greatest groups of all times. Incredible. So, we're not celebrating them, but just to say, too sweet. Too sweet. And that segues us into what happened on Dynamite last night. And wow, a lot of stories going on last night. For one, Tony Khan is still quote-unquote injured from taking the Meltzer driver from the Bucks last week and thus was not at Dynamite. And thanks to some technical issues, the Bucks have assumed total control of Dynamite because not only do they have ironclad contracts to prevent them from being fired by Tony Khan, but yeah, it is a shell of its former self, but I understand. I'm still not sold on Dave Finlay as leader, but it's still there. But not only are the Young Bucks incapable of being fired, because Tony Khan cannot physically be there per the contract, the EVPs assume all the power and can do whatever they want. And they really flexed their shit last night, organizing matches and punishing anyone who decides to talk shit against them, whether it be the world champion Swerve Strickland or Big Stokely Hathaway. And speaking of old Swerve, his first big challenge at Double or Nothing for his title comes none other from the Father of the Year. That's right, Christian Cage, joined by the Patriarchy. Yep. And they actually run a little continuity there with Christian not being happy with Swerve's tag team partnership of him last year last year's at Wembley. Also, he brought up a interesting deep cut. He was getting revenge for old Nick Wayne when Swerve was feuding with Darby Allin last year. Yeah, him and AR Fox jumped Nick Wayne and beat him bloody. So Daddy Cage did not like that. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, he's definitely a contender for Hater of the Year, although he's gonna have to be really, really hateful to get past the hate machine that is Drew McIntyre. Adam Copeland took on House of Black member Buddy Matthews. Excellent 20+ minute match. And he was about to give him the concerto after beating him when Malachi Black appeared in the ring. But instead of jumping at him, he simply said, "Do it. Go on, do it." And then Buddy rolled to his knees and he said, "Do it. Do it." Yeah, that's some incredible stuff. Yeah, Nigel McGinn. Yeah. I say Nigel is probably the only one in AEW who can compete with Drew McIntyre in terms of sheer hatefulness and pettiness. So thank you, Mike Shell. We got some other stuff going on. I'm trying to remember. After so long away, Kenny Omega made his triumphant return, talking about his recovery from diverticulitis. Keep in mind, if you haven't known, diverticulitis is the same intestinal condition that nearly took Brock Lesnar off the census. Yeah, that nearly killed Brock Lesnar. He was lucky. So diverticulitis is not something to be playing around with. Trust me, I've been taking care of my mother for the past 20 years with her own issues with IBS, and I'm knowledgeable on digestive and intestinal conditions, so I can tell you for certain diverticulitis is not a joke. If the doctor said that he was very close to getting killed, yeah, he's not playing. So he's not exactly back, but he's on the mend. And he of course called out the Young Bucks for the things that they did. And for the first time, damn near in a long time, Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada shared a ring. Kenny wanting to face off against Okada one more time, this time in an AEW ring. Okada says in very good English that he is the best bout machine before he was jumped by Jack Perry. And he was selling it pretty well for his stomach conditions and what have you, until he got hit in the stomach by young Jack Perry. Then the Bucks came out there, tried to break things up in their own way, and proceeded to give him a EVP trigger before sending him home and ending Dynamite, the Dynamite portion of the show, in a stretcher. As he was being stretchered out with a little help and assistance from FTR, the New Elite attack, Pearl Harbor's the FTR, beats them. Kenny completely at their mercy. Matthew says, "I'm sorry, we're just doing what's best," and proceed to push him over and further induce more pain to him before Nicholas and Matthew say, "Hey, somebody want to help him?" I'm really digging this storyline. I'm really digging. I've been following the Young Bucks for over a decade, and this is the most evil they have ever been. Just so flat out evil, and I am here for it. Okada, I was uncertain about how he was going to be as a heel, but he has been killing it as a heel. He is just an insufferable prick. And Jack Perry, what more needs to be said about Jack Perry? That promo he cut last night, there was no stuttering, there was no issues. It didn't feel like he was just memorizing something. It felt like he was legitimately pissed. And he's like, "Hey, you made me the scapegoat, Tony Khan. I'm just accepting the role." So yeah, I was waiting to see this. Like I said, I was saying this months and months ago. When and if Jack Perry ever returns to AEW, he'd be a different kind of Jack Perry. He wouldn't be the attempted heel that he was before at the all in Wembley, or nor was he Jungle Boy. No, this is the scapegoat, Jack Perry, and I'm here for it. So all the better. Other news, I watched the recent episode of X-Men 97. Whew, this show just keeps getting better and better. Introduction of Bastion, the Human Sentinels, a nice little callback to X2, X-Men United, with Cyclops driving his Porsche and Cable's in the back, and he's like, "You have a Porsche?" And Scott just gives him like this smile. I love Scott Summers. I love Cyclops in this show so damn much. After decades of him just getting the raw end of the deal in movie format of him just being portrayed as a pussy and a punk, this is what it's like. This is why folks call him Mutant Captain America, because he's fucking Scott Summers. And him working side by side with Cable and Jean. Ugh. Felt so good. God damn. Yes. Let's see. What else is good to talk about? Oh, yes. Let's see. Last time Okada was a heel, Bullet Club had yet made yet. Okay, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. LPH. And it's hard to. It was hard to imagine, but yeah, Okada was a heel at the start of his run in New Japan. I barely remember it, but yeah, Bullet Club was on the rise at that time, and he had to turn face to fight to combat them. So yeah, it's just been so long. It's like you're so used to somebody being a face that you forgot that they were once a heel. Yeah. And also the biggest news concerning Mr. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It was revealed this week that Mr. Rock to save time, both on when he's working out and when shooting movies, that he pisses in a bottle. And I'm not making this up. I wish I was. There was a clip of him promoting some new shoes of his, and then he was showing the shoes, and in the background of his shoes there was this bottle, like a sports bottle, and in it was like some yellow liquid, and in the description he says, yeah, to save time I piss in a bottle. I'm doing me. And the internet has run with that. That is just yeah. And I had and when I saw that clip, I had a train of thought that made me laugh for like 10 minutes straight. Well, you're a trucker. You're a trucker, Hairball. It comes with the territory. I'm not making fun of it at all. My grandfather used to piss in a bottle. In fact, he pissed in a bottle in front of me while he took me to a store one time. I didn't think nothing of it, but it just brought up this image of, what if the negotiation between Rock and Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes went a lot different if we tried to incorporate the bottle. I'm like, so you think you could take on the tribal chief, Cody? Well, the Rock has, the final boss has a condition. That condition, if you don't do this, it's tribal, it's bloodline rules. Anything goes. But if you do it, no bloodline. All right, Rock, what do you got for me? I'll do whatever it takes. All right, all you got to do is drink what's in this bottle. What is it? It doesn't matter what it is. You just have to drink it. Are you sure? I mean, it kind of looks like piss. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It could be a sports drink. A lot of sports drinks looks like piss. Why you gotta think about piss? Because I can't drink dairy. I'm lactose intolerant. The Rock guarantees there's no dairy in that. So you made it yourself. Yes, The Rock produced that, homemade, fresh from The Rock. Why is it the bottle feels kind of warm? Why is it warm? The Rock just made it fresh. Is it at least healthy? It's got plenty of vitamins and minerals. Very tasty. Just drink it. This is piss, isn't it? It doesn't matter if it's piss. Drink it or the match is off. But what about there's got to be something else. Okay, here's the deal. You either drink this is in this bottle, or you shake Randy Orton's hands. That bottle doesn't look so bad, actually. I think I'll do that. Yeah. Oh, Mike Show. That's the. Anybody who's been a fan, or anybody who watches Riff Downs knows exactly what I mean by shaking Randy Orton's hand. That's just weird. Like I said, if that's him, that's him. But the comedy just writes itself. Just. Rock. Oh, that's going to be a short in a couple of days, guaranteed. I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell. All right. Enough talking about rocks, about the Rock's piss. Let's not talk about. Let's not smell what the Rock is cooking in this case. No, let's get to the book. Let's get to the book, guys. Let's get to the book. No more Rock. No more piss jokes. Okay, I promise. No more Rock piss. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Get serious. Serious. Okay. Serious. All right. Okay. No more Rock. No more Rock and piss. No more rocket piss. No more rocket piss. Rocket piss. That's the new flavor of Prime energy drink. Rocket piss. I'm evil. I'm sorry. Okay, okay, let's get serious. Okay, serious time, okay. All right, we'll be moving on to chapters 6 and 7 today. Last time on New World, Lucas and the gang made it all the way to Rum's Row and had an encounter with the pirate probably responsible for the death of Professor Silas Blackthorne, Captain Phineas Crow. After a daring and action-packed escape, they learn that the package and the item in question is lost technology, specifically a portable cryo unit. And inside that cryo unit, a young girl. Who is this girl? What is she? Why was she in the cryo unit? And what exactly is it that is so important about her that people are willing to murder over it? Well, we're going to find out today. Also, as a reminder, for those of you who are, this is your first time watching, I will not be able to look at the chat or anything while I'm reading. So talk amongst yourselves, react to the book and the events that are going on. As we move on to chapter 6. Welcome to the New World, Don Jackson. Young Dawn sat on the rather cold and impersonal table inside of the cryonics facility, clad only in a simple light blue medical smock. It wasn't the first time she visited such a place in her relatively short life, and it still unnerved her. Even though the room was a rather comfy 78 degrees, she was nonetheless couldn't help but feel the sharp chills surrounding her. The implants weren't much comfortable either, but it was necessary for her upcoming slumber, as it were. Just then the door opened and her father walked in, clad in his resplendent U.S. military uniform, chock full of medals and badges for his lifetime of service. It always put her at ease. It brought back memories of her sitting on his lap, playing with his many ribbons and medals. With that warm smile on his aged face, General Jackson sat across the room and embraced his youngest daughter. "How are you, Sunshine?" The woman looked down at the floor. "I'm okay. Just cold." The technicians called it, said they called it the pre-chill chills. Dawn smiled at her father's attempt to calm her nerves with his own brand of dad humor. "They didn't say that, Dad." "No, but they should call it that. It's a good saying." The duo got a decent chuckle from his joke. He touched her, and he noticed her touching and jabbing at her implants. "Are the implants bothering you?" She gave a nod absent-mindedly, rubbing the one on her head. "It's weird to feel, Dad. I know it's needed for the process, but..." He gave her a fatherly kiss on the forehead. "It's okay, Sunshine." Captain Cynthia felt the same way before she went in. "She did?" "Yep." "I wish you were here for this. She and Mom were really close, and she was with her when..." The general patted her back. "I know, Sunshine. I know." He reached into his pocket and produced a small vial of aqua blue liquid. "Here, drink this. It'll put you under and prepare your blood for the freezing." Dawn took the vial, and after a few moments of mentally preparing herself, she downed the drug in a single gulp. "Ugh!" she groaned. "Tastes horrible." "The best stuff always does. You'll be under an hour." "So, how long will I be under?" "Hopefully the treatment will be completed in about a year. Then you'll come out and everything will be all right." "I hope I dream of you and everyone else." The general smiled at her. He was always looking on the bright side, even in the dimmest of situations. When her mother passed, he was beside himself with grief, but it was Dawn who kept her spirits high and made him want to keep going. Always so optimistic. "Listen, dear. As long as you're alive, I'm happy. Even if I and your siblings aren't there for you when you wake up, you will be alive and I will be happy. Whoever is there to greet you when you wake up, their lives will be all the brighter. My little ray of sunshine. My precious Dawn." The young lady's eyes hesitantly fluttered open, as if she were afraid that the world she was waking up to was a dream, and the dream was her only reality. Sadly, she awoke, not in her own room with her beloved blue penguin doll next to her bed, but in a decently furnished cabin on a boat in the middle of the ocean. The bed she was on was comfortable, but lacked the charm of her own. She looked around the room, drab and Spartan, though her father would appreciate it as an army man. There was a little dresser next to her bed with a cup of water on it. Her mouth felt dry. She reached over and took a few tentative sips. It tasted clean, and she didn't feel sick or drowsy, meaning it wasn't drugged. She deemed it safe enough to drink and took a few much-needed gulps. She emptied the contents and placed it back on the table. She could see from outside the window near her bed that it was daytime, midday based on the brightness of the sun. Looking down at herself, she was modestly dressed in a yellow shirt and a pair of loose boxers, which must have been provided by her hosts. Just as she was about to remove herself from the covers and exit the bed, she froze at the sound of the door opening. Reese entered with a tall glass of pink liquid that she didn't recognize. The woman's eyebrows arched as she saw the girl was awake and looking right at her, her face equal parts apprehension and curiosity. "Ah, you're awake." She took sight of the woman, tall, imposing, but moved with a certain gentle grace, not unlike a gazelle on the open African plain. Her dress was a simple black sleeveless t-shirt and jeans that hugged her figure. Her face was such that her hair was such a startling purple that she dared not believe it was dyed, but the most notable thing were her ears that pointed out from the sides of her head. She tried not to stare, but it was very hard not to. "We were worried that you were going to sleep for much longer than this." Her voice was proper and refined, like an upper-class debutante, but not arrogant or condescending. She extended the glass to her. "Drink. It will help you recover your strength." She cautiously took the glass and eyed the liquid. It was thick and a bit chunky, with bits floating in it. It almost looked like a milkshake, but the smell was off-putting to her. She looked back at the elf. Her face was impassive. She didn't seem to be forcing her to drink the strange liquid. She just seemed to be waiting for her to do something. Figured she had nothing left to lose, the girl swallowed some of it. Her face twisted in mild disgust as the taste of sourness hit her tongue, but as it passed through her throat, it morphed into something far more pleasant, like fresh strawberries. "Drink it all in one gulp, please," said Reese. The girl did as she told, and finished it off in record time. The sweeter aftertaste helped her overcome the initial bitterness. "It's an old elven mixture. It's used for recovering muscular strength after prolonged sleep or illness. Luckily, we have the ingredients on board that I can make a batch for you." "Thank you," she finally spoke, placing the glass on the table. "I wasn't sure. Wait, did you say elven?" The question seemed to catch Reese off guard for a few seconds until she realized the girl's position and why she would ask such a thing. She smiled to herself as she answered. "Apologies. I need to remind myself that you haven't seen one of my kind before. Yes, I am elven, meaning that it is from my people, the elves." "You're really an elf?" "Indeed I am. And do not think I haven't noticed that you've been staring at my ears since I entered the room." The girl gave a shy smile. "Sorry." She raised her hand. "It's quite all right. It's something I'm simply not used to, but I can forgive, considering your position." Her words seemed to sink into her head as she looked down at her hands. She was sharing a room with an elf. A real-life elf. The same elves that her older sister used to read to her in the collection of Grimms. She would try her hardest not to stare, but it would take some effort. "So it's true," she spoke. "What that guy said. About how long I've been in since I went in." Reese peeked out of the window and looking at the calm ocean. "Yes, it's true. The year under this time label is 1047 NW. Based on what little I know about you and your unit, you have been in cryostasis for a little over 1100 years. "Wow," she said, not in amazement, but more akin to stark realization. Part of her hoped her revelation was at best an exaggeration, and at worst an outright lie, but it was true. She had prepared herself for the possibility that her family wouldn't be alive if and when she was ever thawed out. This was a bit more than she bargained for. "Wait," she said. "You said NW, not AD?" "It stands for New World. It comes from a statement made by the first emperor. It's hence what this era is referred to," she explained. "New World," she uttered, getting a taste for the term. "Certainly feels like one to me, especially if elves are running around. I am certain that you'll get used to it in time. And speaking of running, The elf walked over to the chair of the room. In it was a pink skirt and a pair of boots. I assume you'll be wanting to stretch your legs after so much time in bed. Good idea, she answered. I am, a little tired of sleeping. Reese gave her a supportive smile as she handed the new articles of clothing to her. She pulled the covers over herself and swung her legs off the bed, placing her feet on the cold floor. Will you need any aid? The girl waved her off. I'm okay, I just need to get my sea legs, as my grandpa would say. Excellent. I can wait outside if you require privacy. No, it's fine, she said, her legs shaking as she stood up. I've dressed in front of others before. I'm not a prude. Very well, Reese replied, watching the young woman slowly begin to dress herself. The skirt is from one of our other members of the group. I would have given you some of mine, but obviously they wouldn't fit. The boots, however, are mine. I hope they're comfortable. The blue-haired woman slid on the pair on, tapping the ground to feel the fit of them. Very. At least it beats heels. You don't like heels? No, I don't. Well, I don't hate them. I only wear heels for formal events or dates. Otherwise, give me a good pair of sneakers and boots any day. Then we shall endeavor to find you a decent pair when we return to the Empire. Oh, if it's okay, can we head back to the U.S. soon? I want to see if I have any relatives still living. It's not likely, but I want to look. The U.S.? The elf asked. The United States. Ah. Sorry, I haven't heard that particular term used in quite some time. Why not? I'm sorry, but unfortunately the United States as you know it no longer exists. It was disbanded over more than 1,000 years ago. The Empire took its place. I see. You don't seem surprised by that. I'm not surprised, just expected. Oh? My dad used to say that no nation can last forever. Even the great United States of America would fall by the wayside, but still, couldn't hurt to ask. You seem very accepting of the fact that your country is dead. Adapt and overcome. Another lesson from Dad. Your father seemed like a wise man. Her smile was full of sadness, old memories, and no small amount of pride. That and a great father. I do not doubt it. So if you're ready, we can take a walk up to the deck. Looking forward to it, she said as she popped up back to her feet. They started to leave when the elf stopped herself and turned to face the girl. What is it? How rude of me. We've been talking all this time and I haven't introduced myself to you. She extended a hand. I am Reese Fold. The girl shook her hand. Dawn Jackson. A pleasure, Dawn Jackson. Now come. Reese led Dawn out of her room and into the hallway, the smell of sea salt strong in the air. Reese's walked at a brisk pace, with Dawn trailing behind a bit. The drink of hers had put a little pep in her step, so to speak. It was almost like a strong shot of coffee. Dawn made note to ask her again to make it for her. So, this empire, where is it exactly? The empire occupies the land that once belonged to the old United States, as well as a few other parts of the continent. The empire is one of the 3 strongest nations in the New World, and also the oldest. Where are we now? We are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, about 2 days away from the empire itself. Glad some things didn't change. Quite. We decided to do some fishing before we head back, so we're in a calm spot. Calm spot? Yes. Do you remember what our leaders said about the moon? Dawn nodded. Well, the event itself had devastating impact on the planet, and not just from the rain of debris from the explosion, mainly altering tides and weather patterns. It took centuries before things to relatively get back to normalcy. One of those changes is the weather in and around the Atlantic, a massive ring of storms we call the storm belts. It used to make sea travel almost impossible, but life adapted. Where we are is one of those few spots where the weather is for the most part calm, hence the name. It's better for fishing when you aren't dealing with massive waves and hard rain and 200-mile-per-hour winds. I assume so. The 2 ladies finally reached the door to the deck, which Reese opened. Dawn shielded her eyes from the bright sun, the sea smell hitting her in the nose like a sledgehammer. The water around them was tranquil and blue. She looked up at the sky, devoid of clouds, wide and open. For her, the world never seemed so free. It was then she noticed a large metal crane that was attached to the deck and swung over to the water. An iron chain dropped into the water below. Next to the railing was Thor and Jinx, muttering to themselves as if they looked over the side. "It's been 30 minutes, said Jinx. Calm yourself, lass, replied Thor. Well, it's taking too long. Fishing in the deep ocean is an exact science, not exactly a quick science. Well, they need to hurry up. I'm getting hungry. If you're hungry, why don't you just strip to your skins and help them out? You know that's not funny. I can't swim. Reese cleared her throat to get their attention. If you two aren't too busy fish watching, we have a guest that requires your attention. The two turned to face the elf and their newest charge. Dawn gave them a small wave and a smile. She then looked over the duo. She found Thor to be small and stocky, a very tough customer by her own words. Jinx was another matter entirely. Her pink hair was eye-catching enough, but seeing her wings peek out the back made her do a double-take. And she could have sworn for a moment her eyes turned a different color, though that might have been a trick of the light. "Oh!" Thor exclaimed, accompanied by the deep laugh. "Our wee sleeping beauty awakens again." The dwarf marched over, but because she can say anything, wrapped his arms around her and lifted her off her feet. Dawn was amazed by this show of strength. He was half her size, and yet he lifted her up like she weighed nothing. Reese lightly slapped him on the back of the head, causing him to drop her back on the deck. "Keep your hands to yourself, flea," she scolded. "Just giving the lass a warm welcome. Certainly better than whatever welcome you gave her." "Don't mind Thor," said Jinx. "He's like that with new people, especially with pretty young girls." "And what's wrong with that? Pretty young girls should be hugged." Dawn giggled. "It's all right. You remind me of an old Irish bartender back home." "You Irish too?" "Ah, no. I'm not Irish, I'm a dwarf," he answered. Where do you think they got the accent from, huh?" "And here I thought you were just a little person. You're a dwarf? A real dwarf?" "Course I be. You act like you've never seen a dwarf before." "That's because she hasn't, half-man," Reese reprimanded. "She's from the old world, remember?" Suppose you got a good point, you pointy-eared harpy." "Would explain why she reacted like she did earlier." "That it did. Oh, I almost forgot. I wanted to say I was sorry about the whole gun thing." "Hey, nothing to be apologizing for, lass," Doris said, kissing her hand. "Wasn't the first time I had a gun pointed at me kisser. Probably not the last time, either." "Of that you can be sure." Thorgan sneered at the elf, who merely matched his sour expression with one of her own. "Well, I suppose there'll be introductions of being old and all that," he started. "I am Thorgan, 9th son of Odin Flang, lord of the clan of Riffall, one of the great clans of the dwarvish city of Roost. Pleasure to be making your acquaintance." Jinx spoke next. "Fella Jinx's consensus. You can call me Jinx if that's too much for you. I'm just a fae. I'm nothing special. Dawn Jackson, daughter of General Alan Jackson," he presented. Thor let out another hearty laugh. "Ah, a lovely name for a lovely girl." "Why, thank you, Thor. You really are kind of smooth." Reese snorted, about as smooth as a gravel pit. "Ah, don't you mind listening to that mean old elf. She's just an unfeeling ice queen because no one will ever love her." "Are they always like this?" Dawn asked Jinx. "Oh no, sometimes they get really, really mean with each other." Dawn chuckled to herself as she watched the elf and the dwarf bicker with one another over something or other. She wasn't sure at this point. Despite the harshness of their words, she didn't feel any deep malice or ill intent behind them. If anything, it almost seemed playful in a way. While they fought, she looked around the deck, taking in the shape and size of the craft they were on. It was then she noticed that they were missing 2 other people. Where are the other 2? The big hairy guy and the guy with the white hair?" she asked to no one in particular. Thor answered, "Oh, the lads are fishing." She double-checked the size of the ship in case she missed them, but as unlikely as it was. "But I don't see them. Or any rods for that matter." "Different kind of fishing," answered Jinx. Just then, something which Don could only equate to a rocket or a flare of some kind erupted from the surface of the water and shot straight up into the sky before exploding into a crowd of crimson. "Oh yeah, we got the bite!" yelled Thor. "Jinx lass, check over the side. I got the winch." The dwarf stand up to the base of the crane as the girl in question flew over to the side with her wings. The chain began to jerk and shake violently back and forth like a live, agitated snake. Jinx grabbed hold of the chain, holding it steady as well as someone her size could do. "How's it looking?" Thor bellowed as he worked the crane's levers. The pink-haired girl looked down at the water and shot back, "Feels like a big one." "That's what I like to hear." Dawn felt Reese's hand on her elbow, guiding her near the opposite side of the ship. "We are going to need to give them some space. Safety reasons and all." Dawn wasn't about to argue with her as the ship jolted from whatever it is they caught. She almost lost her footing if not for the steady hand of Reese, who, to her continued astonishment, was somehow not bothered by the rolling of the boat. It's like she had picture-perfect balance, and she envied that right now. "Ah, come on, you bastard!" Thor bellowed with a like a diminutive Captain Ahab. "Fight all you want. We're still gonna eat ya!" "Slack up the chain or it's gonna snap!" Jinx called out. Thor operated the levers like a madman, pulling and jerking them with wild abandon. "What did they catch?" Dawn asked, struggling to stay erect. Reese, arms folded and face the other picture of stoic calm, answered, "Something tasty, I hope." "It's coming! Let her go, Thor!" Using his foot, he kicked the large lever next to him, causing the chain to pull up rapidly. Jinx fled from the rail and dove for the deck. What the crane pulled out once again rendered Dawn utterly speechless, but what came up from the deep was by far the largest fish she had ever seen. It was well over 25 feet long, deep gray with fins the size of a Ford Mustang. Its jaws were frighteningly large, rows upon rows of presumably sharp teeth, more than enough to swallow a person whole. It thrashed about, fighting to break free from the chain and hook attached to its skin. Jinx and Thor whooped at the size of their catch, while Reese only nodded approvingly. "Those brilliant bastards! They've gone and caught a mega shark!" Dawn did a double take. Did you just say a mega shark?" "Oh yeah, Dawn girl, it's a mega shark. 2, maybe 3 years old at least." "But I thought mega sharks were a myth." "Don Jackson," spoke Reese, "even the biggest myths have the smallest grain of truth. Although it is impressive they were able to catch one. Mega sharks only stay around the storm belts." Dawn looked up to the creature and noticed then that Groose was hanging off the side of it, holding a large spear and sporting a rather nice pair of diving goggles. "Son Chi!" he roared. "Ah, you done us good, Groose, oh boy!" cheered Thor, as the soaked ape jumped down to the deck. "How in the name of the Stone Lords did you find this beastie?" "Dolachin Mazonakita," he answered, motioning towards the open sea. "Straggler, huh? Well, we'll be eating good today, thanks to you, my boy." The massive Sasquatch shook himself dry like a dog, getting nearly everyone around him wet. After he was appropriately dry, he caught sight of the blue-haired girl on deck and walked over, a toothy grin spread across his face. Dawn tried to steel her nerves as the mountain of fur stomped over. She was somewhat afraid of him, being that she had never seen one of his kind before, but she reminded herself that he didn't mean her any harm. However, that didn't stop her from taking an instinctive step backwards. He stopped a good foot away before greeting her. "Nonashi." His language was utterly alien to her. She was fluent in a few languages, namely French, Japanese, and a bit of Creole, but this was beyond her. She heard bits and pieces of it from when she woke up from her cryo unit and just now from the conversation between him and the others. Secretly, she wanted to try to pick up his rather unique language, but it seemed foreign that she thought her tongue would snap off at the root if she tried to pronounce some of what he just said. Jinx picked up her confusion and spoke. "He's saying hello." "Oh," she uttered. "Hello to you too. His name is Groose." "Hello, Groose." She lengthened her hand towards him. The hairy ape grasped the relatively tiny hand with his own. Dawn jumped a little. Despite his intimidating appearance, his grip was gentle. almost like he was holding a bubble in his hand and didn't want to pop it. The tender clench was all she needed to know to blow away all of her fears and anxieties. Groose she could trust. Soshatama Shinaki. Dawn looked over the other three, looking for someone to translate. Thor took the job. He pretty much says he's sorry for scaring you when you woke up from the unit. Oh, okay, she said, looking back at Groose. It's okay, I know you didn't mean it. She looked at the others. He does understand me, right? Aye, of course, Dawn girl. He understands commons well enough. Her head cocked to the side. Commons? She asked. It means the common language in the Empire. I would believe the word is English in the old world, answered Reese. Dawn cracked a smile. It's English, Reese. I stand corrected. So what language is that? It is called Sasquatch. Nearly everyone knows it, but very few outside Sasquatches can really speak it with any kind of fluidity, though it is preferable for both parties. Wait, Dawn uttered, turning back to Groose. He's a Bigfoot? Groose looked at her quizzically before speaking to Thor. Donda cha chicha Bigfoot? I think that's what they called your people back then, Groose. The giant looked at his own bare feet for a minute before speaking again to his friend. No ne ma tompa. Well, they are pretty big, boyo. This caused Dawn to laugh. She didn't understand what he said, but she gleaned enough from the exchange to get the gist of what he said. There was an inherent silliness to Groose that she picked up and liked almost immediately. He could tear her limb from limb with ease, but it would take one to crush an egg, but she knew he would never use his clearly titanic strength in such a way. She knew not a single word he spoke, but got all she needed from their short meeting to know that he wouldn't willingly cause her harm. Everyone's attention suddenly shifted to the large spear being thrown from the water and clattering on the deck. Shortly thereafter, a pair of hands climbed up the rope ladder over the side of the rim, and the dripping and grumpy form of Lucas Kane climbed up on deck. Don't worry about me, he called out. I'm fine. Don't need a lick of help. Lucas sported only a pair of swim trunks, goggles, and a very large knife holstered in his belt. What took you so damn long, lad? Damn kraken, he grumbled as he took out his blade and cleaned up bits of slime that Dawn couldn't identify from his trunks. Fleckin' bastard attacked me just before we chained up the big fella here. Had to fight him. You killed a kraken? Once again, in so many minutes, Dawn found herself aghast. Again. First a mega shark, now a kraken? Just how many mythological creatures are real in this day and age? Oh, no, I didn't kill the thing. That'd be stupid, he said with about as much stress one would say to shooing a stray dog off his lawn. But he'll know it wasn't a fight. Lucas reached behind his back and pulled off a rather sizable tentacle. He plopped the appendage on deck, still wriggling around as if it were attached to his owner. Groose gazed hungrily at the piece. Doseka. Go ahead. The Sasquatch gleefully smiled as he scooped up and began to eat it. Lucas finally realized who he was talking to and strode up to her, taking off his goggles to see her better. So you woke up? That's good. It was here that Dawn could finally get a good look at the man who just days before was nearly killed by her. Physically, he was in great shape, not a body cut out of granite like her old childhood friend Kenny, but toned and firm. His muscles were practical to her, not for show. There were small packets of fat here and there around his midsection, but they were a healthy sort of fat. His silver white hair was slicked back by the water. She didn't notice his eyes, both intimidating and alluring at the same time. He wasn't earth-shatteringly handsome like some famous model or actor. He was more ruggedly handsome, like an adventurer or a frontiersman. For a moment, she found herself feeling a bit self-conscious by her own appearance. Just then, she noticed something that caught her eye. A decently sized scar on his right side that stretched from his hip to his ribs. She found it resembled a J and didn't seem like a surgical scar, at least not from any procedure she'd ever seen. She caught herself staring. There was a story there, but she didn't feel right asking him about it. Have a good nap? Lucas asked. She popped out of her thoughts just as he was about a foot or two from her. Yeah, she sputtered. Didn't think I was that tired. Surprising considering how long you slept, he joked, getting a cute smile from her. I trust the crew haven't scared you too much. She looked over at the four companions with a pleasing smile. They've been more than accommodating, in spite of my earlier outburst, she said, giving him a smile bow. I'm so sorry for pointing a gun at you and your friends. Lucas shook his head and smiled. It's fine. I'm just glad you didn't kill yourself. I appreciate the concern, but like I said, I know my way around a gun. Not my guns, you don't. Not one of my guns, you don't. If you had pulled the trigger, it would have probably killed you and me along with it. It's a special type of gun that's very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. Don soaked up the information. He did have a point. The firearms of this era will more likely have changed, and if he said it could kill her, you'd have to take his word for it. I stand corrected. Glad you're feeling welcome, Miss Don, she answered, extending her hand to him. Don Jackson. He took her hand in his own. Lucas Kane. A pleasure. Their little meeting and meet and greet was interrupted by the hungry growls of the young lady's stomach, which were audible to everyone gathered. Dawn released Lucas's hand and covered her stomach, her face red with embarrassment. Oh, sorry about that. Looks like someone could use a meal, poked Jinx. Aside from that drink Reese gave me earlier, I haven't really eaten anything since I woke up. Then let's fix that, said Lucas. That's why we caught this monster today. Thor, get your knives. The dwarf walked over to the fish and petted it gently. Oh, you beastie. I've got such plans for ya. Gonna be good eating. You are cooking, half-man? Snapped Reese. Please don't go overboard with those spices. I was congested for 3 days from the last time you cooked. You'll eat what I make and like it, you dwarf whore. He roared back. Dawn heard him say something in his language. Dawn heard her say something in a language that she didn't know, but based on her facial expressions and tones, it wasn't anything nice or flattering. Still, she couldn't help but giggle at the exchange. Well, while you guys are starting with the shark, I'm going to my room. I really need to dry off and get some damn clothes, Lucas said, shivering slightly. I still have some more clothes if you want to change into something different, Dawn, offered Jinx. Dawn looked down her wardrobe and considered her offer for a few seconds. I can take a look, but can I keep the boots? She asked. Reese gave her the briefest of smiles before answering. They are yours as long as you need them, Dawn Jackson. She bowed her head in thanks before following Jinx to her room. Dawn, called Groose. Satimata honcha mikai. She looked at Reese for a quick translation. He says that he likes your hair and it matches your eyes. Ah, thank you, Groose. It was here that she really considered his translated words. Something was wrong with it. Not the compliment itself, but rather the content. Her face twisted up when she as she tried to make sense of what he said. My eyes are blue. The others traded looks between themselves at her declaration. Yes, Lucas said. Your eyes are blue. Yeah, they really match your hair. The young lady scrambled to a nearby window to look at her reflection. Seeing herself for the first time in over 1,000 years, she took in her image, focused mainly on her hair. Then she let out a surprised and horrified scream, catching everyone off guard. Ah! Dawn girl, what's the matter with you? Asked Thor. My hair! She yelled, grabbing her locks. Aye, yes, your hair, and a lovely shade of blue it is. But, she stammered, my hair was red. The crew flinched at her bit at a revelation, now understanding the source of her outrage. The poor girl's hair racked through her hair, as almost if she were trying to drag the blue out of the strands. Jinx walked up next to her, leaning on her. So, you dye it? No, she answered, incensed. I never dye my hair. Jinx stared at her for a few moments before speaking. I think I know what happened. Dawn's face turned to the Fae, eager for an explanation. From what little I know and what I've read up on the web about cryonics, there's a strange phenomenon that happens to people who go in. Hewing, I think it's called. It happens when a person stays under for a long period of time. About 2 or 3 years, the average. The plasma in your blood has an interesting reaction with the stasis fluid, causing parts of the body to turn blue. Normally, it happens to fingertips or lips, and in some cases, it turns parts of the skin blue. But this is the first time I've heard it happening to hair. Can you reverse it? She asked, looking at the tips of her hair. Jinx shook her head. It's lost tech, Don. It's a miracle we got as much information we could on the unit itself. I don't know of anyone who knows about it well enough to reverse it. No, she muttered, her posture deflating at the news. Noncha, Don. Tiptasa no Nietzsche, said Groose. Groose has a point, added Dawn. You look good with the blue. Aye, gives you a bit more character. It's not that, she replied. It's just... my dad, he really liked my hair. Said it reminded him of a sunrise in New Hampshire. Her words froze in her throat. The crew could see the poor girl's eyes were fighting back a few tears as she looked in her reflection, like a girl who had to just accept that her favorite pet had died. Her hair was the connection to her father and a family in a world that was long since gone. She put up a brave face since she woke, but her blue hair was the tipping point for her. Jinx gave her a sideways hug. It wasn't much, but it was reassuring enough to snap her out of her funk. I'm sorry, Don. If you want, we can dye it back when we get home. Thanks, but no, she said, wiping a few rebel tears from her eyes. It wouldn't be the same. Besides, I hate hair dye. If you're sure. Adapt and overcome, she muttered again. Reese had heard the girl mention the phrase earlier in her cabin, but didn't inquire to its meaning. She would have asked her again right then and there, but she saw that it wasn't a good time. I still have some clothes in my room. How about you look through them and see if you can find anything more your style? Jinx offered. She turned and gave her a smile. I'd like that. And if possible, can I get a shower too? I think I'm 1,000 years overdue for one. The others gave a smattering of casual laughs at her comment. Lucas snapped his head towards the hairy beast. Groose, that's a rude thing to say, especially to a woman. Dawn looked at Lucas, silently asking what he said. Lucas waved him off. It's nothing, just Groose being, well, Groose. She made a small mental note to try to learn Groose's language as soon as possible. Now, Jinx, see to our guests. It's going to be a while before dinner's served, so no rush. Jinx nodded, and she and Dawn headed back below deck. Lucas motioned with his hands towards Reese, and the elf followed behind them swiftly. I'm going to go dry myself off and get dressed. Thor, get your blades. It was late in the evening when Don Jackson, fresh from a shower and sporting a rather fetching... Hold on. Hold on for a second. That's my sister. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Bye. Sorry, that was my sister. She was informing me that school had been canceled for my nephew, so they got a day off tomorrow, so there's that. All right, let's start this over again. It was late in the evening when Don Jackson, fresh out of a shower and sporting a rather fetching pink sundress, sat down for dinner on deck of the ship. The table was long, about 12 feet, and wooden, with a few makeshift chairs placed around it. She had been given the best one, even though she didn't ask for any special treatment, but the crew insisted that she be made as comfortable as possible. Her eyes scanned the darkened skies, trying to catch the faintest glimpses of the few constellations she was familiar with. Regrettably, it was far too early in the evening to see any stars. Her body was still a bit chilled from her much-needed shower. She used to take for granted the simple joy of a shower, how utterly relaxing and cleaning it was, not just for the body, but for the soul as well. She showered for a good 30 minutes. After the first 10, she mentally waited until either Jinx or Reese knocked on the door of the modest bathroom to tell her that it was time to get out, but it never came. They gave her space to finally process everything that happened to her. She wept. Not an outcry of despair or sorrow, just a quiet cry to herself. The last time she cried was 6 years before she went under. It was for her beloved grandfather, Samuel, a college teacher whom she loved, who awoke her love of history and the myths. Now she cried for everyone else. Her mind finally accepted the truth. Everyone and everything she knew and loved was gone. She wept for 6 solid minutes before regaining her composure and ending her shower time. Her mind snapped out of her mind snapped out from it, searching for thanks to the smell of cooking, particularly that of grilled fish. Lucas, Thor, and Groose were very efficient at killing, gutting, and preparing the mega shark. By the time they'd finished at her shower and selected the dress for Jinx's surprisingly large wardrobe, the giant fish had been cut into large strips of gray flesh that hung off lines of rope strung across the deck. Over near the edge was a large black grill with red coals on the bottom, and the sounds of sizzling meat filled the air. She quietly observed the activities of the people who were her only friends in this new world of theirs. They were all in the midst of preparing various foods and drink for the feast to come. She was always a people watcher, getting a gauge of this crew and their interactions with each other and seeing bits and pieces of their personality. Thor she really liked. He was in your face and upfront about his feelings and thoughts. Some would call him rude and offensive, but again, she reminded him of an Irish pub owner who was a friend of her father's. The dwarf made comments about her appearance, but she didn't really mind. He seemed very friendly with his compliments. Reese intimidated her, and not just because she was taller than her. The elf had this air of aristocratic indifference about her, like she was she was beyond anything petty outside of the barb she shot at the door. She spoke plainly and calmly, never loud or using unnecessary words. She spoke clearly and straight. But there was a gentleness in her words that Dawn didn't miss. He was intimidated by her, but she wasn't afraid of her. The bickering, oh, the bickering. There were many a time she almost choked herself from laughing at the near constant arguing between the two. It wasn't hateful or mean-spirited, it was just there, really. They fought nearly over everything. The food, the cooking, Reese's attire, Thor's beard, the weather. Hell, they fought over the last time they fought. Interspersed in their arguments were bits of what she could only describe as their native languages. Thor's language was clipped and rough, with hard syllables and even harder sentences. Reese's was light and airy, with longer words that seemed to go on forever. If she equated them to physical attacks, Dwarvish was like a boxer's right uppercut to the jaw, and Elvish was a swift kick from a kung fu master to your stomach. Groose was a bit harder to read, due to the language barrier and all. The largest of her new friends, he seemed the most cuddly. Her initial fear of him was cut down by her observations of him and how he interacted with the rest. He'd helped anyone who asked for it and was simple to please, good-natured and something of a sweetheart, it seems. She spotted how he went out of his way to feed some of the dolphins that swam by the boat. After this, he was about as menacing as a teddy bear riding a puppy. She had gotten used to Jinx quite a bit while she's picking out a new outfit for herself. Dawn found she had very similar to her in every aspects. Fashionable, but not overly girly. Tough as nails, and a shared hatred of heels. She was clearly the most tech-savvy of the bunch. That wrist computer she found on her fascinated her to no end, even if Dawn herself could barely work her old cell phone without her older sister May showing her exactly how it worked. And then there was Lucas Kane, the only other human on board. It was clear to her that he was definitely in charge of the group, but he didn't get off the vibes of a boss to her. He was more like the glue that kept these vastly different personalities together and in line. He didn't bark out orders or demand anyone if they ever made a mistake. He simply made requests and they were followed. Dawn noticed his smile the most. A singular smile that seemed to put her mind at ease, like a assurance that even in the face of Armageddon, you would be all right around him. He was also silly, too, sharing a few dirty jokes between himself and Thor. He laughed like a big kid, loud and free. She found herself choking back a bit more laughs at his attempts to control the bickering between Thor and Reese. At those times, he seemed less like a leader and more like an overstressed schoolteacher. Dawn girl! A round of people watching concluded when the dwarf came up to her and placed a plate of food in front of her. Supper time. She looked down at the contents of her plate. There was a large piece of meat in the center, presumably the mega shark. The skin was dark brown with bits of gray peeking out. She sniffed it. It didn't smell all that appealing, at least as far as seafood went. Next was a purple mass of something that looked like a mix between thick mashed potatoes, refried beans, and chopped lettuce. The bubbling didn't assure her of its potential taste. On the side of the fish was a roll, a deep yellow roll. She had never had a yellow roll before. Rounding off the dish was a glass of green swirling liquid with flakes of gold around in it. "Oh, don't you worry, lass," he said, noticing a curious glance at the drink. "No booze be in there. Don't want you getting stewed on your first night here, unless you be wanting a wee nip at the beast." "Oh, no, thank you, Thor. This is fine," she replied. "Whatever this is." "It'll give you what you been eating, which is a full stomach. Now, get to eating, lass." Dawn took a fork to her plate and cut into the fish. It was surprisingly tender and a bit flakier than she thought, but the gray color was still putting her off in the right mood. She looked back at Thor. He smiled and waved to her to eat. Not wanting to be rude and no longer able to ignore the hunger pains that plagued her for the last few hours, she took an uneasy bite. "This is good," she uttered as she finished chewing. The fish was far better tasting than it looked, and the seasoning was sharp, but worked with the natural ocean taste of the shark. It wasn't long before she scooped up another forkful of fish into her mouth. Thor proudly chuckled. "She likes it. As if there was any doubt. Me grand special robe strikes again." Dawn felt Reese sit next to her, her own plate in hand. "Do not get so full of yourself," she commented. She was merely hungry. She would eat anything at this point. "But I'm not wrong, am I?" The elf took a bite of her own fish and merely rolled her eyes to the side. Thor smiled at that and walked off to get his own helping. "Is it really that bad to you?" whispered Dawn. Reese turned to her and said, "It is adequate, but do not tell him that. His head is already big enough." A snicker escaped her lips. The snark between them was so refreshing, allowing her to ease into understanding them. One by one, they each took their seats at the table, with Lucas taking the other seat next to her. The food, despite having odd appearances, were very tasty. The drink reminded her of a soda she used to drink when she was a child. They stopped making it when she entered college, and she seriously doubted they still made it now, but still, it was a nice reminder of her old life. A pleasant home, 1,000 years removed. "That's Rustian seasoning for you," Thor proclaimed after he ate the fish. "Nothing beats it in the whole of the Empire." "Rustian?" asked Dawn. "As in from Roost. What's that?" "It's my hometown. The great dwarvish city of Roost." "Here we go," muttered Reese before taking a drink. "Is that where all dwarves come from, like an ancestral city?" Thor gave a laugh, but not in such a way that would seem to be insulting to her question. "I know, lass. Roost is not where we come from. It's more like a dream city." The dwarf's eyes drifted skyward as he talked about his home. "It is said that the great blacksmith, Alvish Hammerfall, received a vision from Dankirk, our god, of a great city for dwarves. A city that will showcase our talents for engineering and design to the very heavens. And from that vision came the plans for Roost. We've held them for 3,500 years until we found the right place, the right time for it." The others weren't exactly interested in his story. For them, it's common knowledge, something everyone knew, who learned about it in Start School. Dawn, however, was utterly enraptured by his tale. "And Roost, where is it?" "Up north," he answered. "The Emperor was kind enough to allot the Great Fathers a plot of land, and the north was a best spot for it all. Good ore, good trees, good weather. Couldn't ask for a better place to found a city." He let out a wistful sigh. "I wish I could take you there now, Dawn girl. So much to see. The Bilka Street Market, the Hammerfall Library, Hall of the 12 Mountain Lords, the Mines of Shadowside. Oh, it'll be a great sight for a newcomer." "If only you could stand the smell," spoke Reese. "Well, I'm sorry that me city of smells of industry in progress offends your dainty, fragile elf nose. Do you want I should give you a mask?" Thor shot back before eating his roll. "Is it really that bad?" asked Dawn. "Only if you dislike the smell of burning coal and hairy feet everywhere." Thor gave her "Only if you like the smell of burning coal and hairy feet everywhere." Thor gave her a sour glare. "And I suppose it's better than where you come from, then, huh?" asked Dawn. Reese took another sip of her drink. "Better," she answered, casting an arrogant glance at the dwarf. Far better. Thor mumbled something in Dwarvish. Dawn really needed to start learning these languages when she could. My homeland is called Shi'alufu. In Commons, it means the Clear Islands. Like the name suggests, it's a collection of 18 islands in the ocean in the southeast of the Empire. It's been our home for the last 10,000 years. I believe you know the closest island to him as Bermuda. Bermuda? Dawn ran through her limited knowledge of geography and recalled the area she was referring to. But there aren't any islands like that near Bermuda. At least the last time I checked, there weren't. She gave the human a wistful smile. Not too surprising. The islands themselves were once surrounded by a magical shield that prevented outside surveillance. It's how we stay off human maps for eons. But what if someone just sailed there by accident or something? The shield could also affect the consciousness of any non-elf who passes through it. If any humans happened to sail through it, it would put them in a type of waking coma, which made them very susceptible to mental suggestion. We would meet with the incapacitated travelers, transport them to the other side of the region, alter the logs and records, and send them on their way with a new memory to hide what really happened to them there. It was difficult to do at first, but over time it became quite easier. It was helpful. It was helped by those numerous legends you humans created about the area. Certainly made it easier for people to steer clear of our home. Dawn's face twisted up as she processed the history of her home. Then she made a startling connection. Wait, she uttered. You're talking about the Bermuda Triangle. You're from the Bermuda Triangle? I suppose you could say that. So all those stories of missing ships, lost time, strange phenomena, that was your people? She thought for a little bit about how she would want to answer. Some are true, others not true, and a few, well, we all have our secrets. At this point, I should stop being so surprised. She laughed. So what are the Clear Islands like? Clean and orderly, she started. I hail from the main island called Tel Shiloah, which means the firm center. It was, I suppose the nearest term for it is capital. It was the center of trade, education, governance, and culture for my people. At the center of the island is the Alabaster Tower. It was built thousands of years ago after the Third Monster War. It served as a symbol of the strength and unity of our people. My brother used to take me there when I was a child, to bask in its size and grandeur. I always wanted to see it, but my father was always too busy, so my brother took me there one day. He sounds like he's a good brother. Yes, he was. That was all Dawn needed to hear, really. Between that and the shift of mood when she mentioned her siblings, she knew there was a sore subject, and one she did not want to broach this soon after their hopefully long friendship. Her normal impassive face gave way to barely restrained sorrow. She didn't know what to say at that moment, but the first to speak was from a surprising source. Your brother had a good eye for architecture, spoke Thor. His voice was lacking the loud, bombastic nature she had come to know. It was a simple statement, but the effect was clear. Rhys looked up at him. His bearded face was neutral, absent of the sneers and hostile stares that usually graced his appearance when he talked to her. Her sorrow was lifted at the moment, and she returned to her regular countenance. This little exchange wasn't missed by anyone, including Dawn. The tension gone, Dawn turned to Jinx, her curiosity now in full effect. What about you, Jinx? Where are you from? Jinx had finished off her roll before she answered. Oh, nowhere in particular. I'm a fae. Forest folk. Wherever there's nature, you'll find us. Forest folk? Yep, it's a cover term, meaning anyone with a deep connection to nature. Faes, sprites, nymphs, leprechauns, gnomes, wood sprites. At this point, her sense of astonishment was finding out about new races that she originally thought were fictional had greatly reduced, and she just merely accepted it as part of this new world. I thought faes were small. Young faes are small, about the size of a butterfly. But the older ones can increase their size to mine, but only with the proper knowledge and magic to pull it off. Took me years before I could get to this size. I've heard legends about faes. Didn't think they were real, but then again, Dawn motioned to the other non-humans around her. It's understandable from your perspective. Before Skyfall and the chaotic century, forest folk went out of our way to keep hidden from human eyes. The times when we were known to your race were unpleasant, to say the least, she explained. Then things changed. The founding of the Empire gave us a chance to come back out and not worry about people treating us so differently. There are still some who live in forests, but you can find quite a number of Fae in the larger cities of the Empire. You'll see when we get there. Hope so. I've always wanted to see a real-life leprechaun. Trust me, spoke Lucas. Go on any street corner in New York and you'll see one of them. His comment brought a chorus of laughter from everyone, save Dawn. She didn't understand what he meant, but took his word for it. How about you, Bruce? Where'd you come from? The Sasquatch just finished off 2 plates of food when she asked him next. He gave a large burp before speaking. Sema, asano ma staccato mosha yo Alaska. She recognized Alaska in his speech, but turned to Lucas to translate everything. He said he's from the Alaskan Islands. Islands? When Skyfall happened, a lot of parts of the planet were really messed up. It's mainly some land masses. Alaska was one of them. Between the rain of debris from the moon and the altered tides, the whole state turned into a bunch of islands. Oh my, he said. Do people still live there? Oh, they did at first, but the winters got so bad that no one could stay there for long before freezing to death. Only the native animals and the Sasquatches can live there. That's where Groose is from. Groose spoke again, motioning with his fingers on the table. He had the urge to travel and see the rest of the Empire, so he said goodbye to his creme and walked all the way down here. Krem? Is that your hometown? Lucas answered for him. Krem is like a family unit, a sort of village of extended family members. Groose left behind 17 brothers and 24 sisters with his parents. Do you miss them? Groose shook his head. No nema, no sita Krem krosta, ero mira chechusta. Not really. Krems don't operate like other families. They encourage their members to venture out and see the world. They only come back when a family member dies, or a wedding happens, or when it's in the fall. If he sees them again, it will be when the winds and fates allow it. It's certainly different from what I know of a family is, but if that's what you do, who am I to judge? Bruce slashed a toothy grin, with bits of food stuck in between them. And you, Lucas? She asked. Me? I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. At least I think so, he answered cryptically. You're not going to tell me anymore? You got to earn that, like everyone else here. He smirked as he sipped his drink. He is not joking, spoke Reese. It took me 9 months before he told me where he lived. 11 months for me, added Dor. 8.5, spoke Jinx. Dosema! Goose added, holding up 10 fingers. The Dawn got the message clear enough. Lucas Kane was a hard book to read, but she would find a way to read him. She loved books, after all. She finished off her fish before speaking again. You guys seem like such pros, but then again, I must not be the first person you've woken up. What do you mean? Asked Lucas. The whole waking me up thing. You guys seem like you've done this before. She finished off her drink while the others exchanged glances with each other. Don, you're our, first frozen person, Lucas answered unsurely. What? He means that our occupation was not to wake people up from cryostasis. It was part of the job. And what's your job? Lucas turned to her and tried to find the proper words to explain it. We're freelancers. We get hired to find people and things. Mainly people, but sometimes objects. So you're bounty hunters? Something like that. We often do take on bounties, but we don't kill. We're not assassins. Although sometimes we have to use more lethal force when on a job, added Reese. How often? Dawn asked. The others didn't really have the heart to answer, which told her all she needed to know. Right. Back on topic, said Lucas. We were given a job by a third party a few days ago. It was to find an object. A very important object that was part of a crime that cost the life of a good and intelligent man. Dawn didn't miss the hitch in his voice. It was enough to tell her that this job was a lot more personal than she thought, but she didn't want to impede his explanation. I'm listening. Okay, so we were able to track the object down to a group of pirates that just outside the Empire. Hence why we were in the middle of the ocean. Had to find my way out of a town full of them just to get out of there. Had to fight my way out of a town full of them just to get out of there. But what does that have to do with me? Simple. The object was you, he said. Well, more specifically, it was your cryo unit. My unit? All right, but I thought you didn't deal with cryo units. Well, lass, we didn't know what it was until Luke got a gander at it, peeked Thor. We would have had only had a basic description of the thing. Length, width, weight, that sort of thing. If we had any idea the blasted thing was lost technology, we would have handled things a lot differently. But it's just a cryo unit. They're worth a lot from where I'm from. Exactly, where you're from, spoke Jinx. Technology, working technology from your time was mostly wiped out, either by Skyfall, the Long War, or just plain lost. That unit is literally worth its weight in gold. We could sell that thing to the right buyer and we'd be set for life. Whoa, Dawn muttered. That's a lot to take in. Is it, though? So, these pirates, they took my unit to sell it or something? That's the theory, said Lucas, at least for now. I see. So, why wake me up? Didn't really have much of a choice, really. The unit was damaged during our escape from the pirates. We didn't have the knowledge or the tools to repair it, so it was either let you die or wake you up. And frankly, I didn't want to head back home with a corpse. It's justifiable. I wouldn't want to be caught with a dead body, but regardless, thank you for waking me up. Thank you all, she expressed. She looked around at the people she had come to know for the last few hours. They were really good people, and she had hoped that they would be her friends if possible. Suddenly, she stopped her gratitude and remembered something important. She stood up sharply, clenching her stomach. Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, Dongo, what's the matter? I think I'm going to die anyway. The crew looked at her worriedly, as if she had gone crazy. She saw their pondering gazes and answered, It's the reason why I'm in the cryo unit in the first place. I have Benson's disease. Benson's? Mouthed Lucas. It's a digestive issue. It was almost everywhere back in my time, she answered solemnly. My mom died from it when I was little. We couldn't afford stasis back then. Dad didn't make enough to get one. When I first showed symptoms, Dad was already a general and could easily afford it, but even then... Is the disease fatal? 90% fatal, she answered grimly. Even with the best treatments and medical facilities around, the mortality rate was still pretty high. Before I went in, the doctors gave me a year at best. Her tone was not unlike that of a person heading to the gallows to be executed. Her levity was shot and left for dead when she remembered that she was a woman with a ticking time bomb in her stomach. She felt dread, not only having to remind herself that she was dying, but she was going to be separated from the people who saved her, who she considered her new friends. She would have walked away to her cabin to silently wait for her demise, when her new fave friend spoke up. Wait, did you say Benson's disease? Yes, why? Jinx's expression lightened up. Then you've got nothing to worry about. She looked over at Lucas. Take her to Dr. O, he'll fix her up. You're sure? He asked. I may not know much about old world illnesses, but if it can be cured, Dr. O can fix it. You mean there's a cure? She asked, hope returning to her eyes. Probably. Dr. O does good work. So that means, she muttered as Lucas guided her back to her seat, it means you can get to relax and not worry about it for now. Ah, he's right, lass. You really think we're going to let you die after getting to know ya? Asked Thor, with Grooves nodding with him. The dwarf has a point, Reese added. You're in good hands. Dawn couldn't help but tear up a bit. They really were the best people who could have found and woken her up. Even though it had only been a few hours since he started to get to know them, she found herself trusting them more than she really should. Right now, they were the friends she needed. Can I have some more fish? Dawn stood at the bridge of the ship as it exited the storm belts, which meant they were almost to New York. 2 days it took to travel from the calm spot to their current location was not as boring as she thought. She learned to play New Texas Hold'em with Lucas, Thor, and Jinx. The Fae was quite the card shark, cleaning out all three of them in a few hands. Reese didn't want to play. She said the game was beneath her. Dawn later found out that she only played the game once and lost horribly to Dor. She never touched the game again. Crew spent the trip either sleeping in whatever place seemed comfortable or being sick from the rocking of the boat in the storms. Don would often join him in joint vomiting sections over the side, sort of a bonding experience for them. Jinx was kind enough to let her play around with her wrist computer. It marveled her at how much processing power it had. She spent several hours just randomly surfing the web, just seeing how far things had progressed in 1,000 years. Thankfully, Jinx was kind enough to keep her away from sites that she might not be ready to look at, though she would have to ask what exactly a slime show was. Dawn got a small crash course in Magitech guns from Lucas, specifically his revolvers. She broke out in a cold sweat after hearing him explain not only how Mark II revolvers worked, but how dangerous they can be when someone who has no clue what they're doing uses it. She was no stranger to guns, being an army brat, but Lucas's gun, she was admitted to herself, they scared her badly. But now was not the time to worry about such things. Now they were almost to New York. The last time she was there, it was to visit her older sister Iris, who moved to Manhattan of all places. They didn't do much outside of eating some pizza and seeing a movie. They had fun, though, and enjoyed her visit to the biggest city in the U.S. Now she was going to see the city again, after 1,000 years. "She'll be coming up to the city soon," announced Jinx as she skillfully piloted the ship. She was stunned that the Fae was the one responsible for their passage through the storm belts. She didn't take her for the sort, but she couldn't deny her skill. Dawn looked out from the forward windows. There was the thick fog around them, but she couldn't make out she could make out the large beacon from what she thought was a lighthouse, and a large collection of lights on the horizon she assumed was the city. The crew filtered onto the bridge as they got closer to their destination. Finally, the fog cleared up. "Dawn, welcome to New York City," announced Lucas as the city came into view. For Dawn, the city definitely had changed from the last time she was there. It seemed larger and more spread out than before. The buildings seemed to reach the sky more up than the last time. The skyline seemed to swope upwards, like a handle trying to reach the dark sky with its fingertips. The most notable feature was the almost impossibly huge skyscraper in the middle of it all. She could make out dots of lights climbing up the dark skin of the building. It reminded her of the Empire State Building, but she shook away such thoughts. There was no way that building would have survived the centuries between then and now. "So what do you think?" "It looks different." She started trying to find the right words. "But it feels like New York." "Good to know." Her blue eyes drifted to the left to see the source of the lighthouse. Only it wasn't a lighthouse. It was a gigantic arm stretching upwards, clutching a torch that emitted light that could cut through the earlier fog. A question lived and died on her lips as she found it oddly familiar about the structure. That would be Liberty's torch," Lucas answered. "From what I understand, it used to be part of some big statue that stood up around here. Big sucker, too, from what I heard. It was wrecked at Skyfall. The arm was the only part that was salvageable. When the Empire was founded, one of the first things the Emperor did was commission it to be turned into that beacon. Kinda wish I knew what that baby looked like before it was totaled." "Statue of Liberty." The crew turned to Dawn as she spoke. "That's what it was called. It was a gift from France, a sort of present for the founding of the U.S. It was a giant robed woman with a big crown on her head, holding the torch. Came to represent hope." "Hope?" asked Jinx. "Yeah. At the time it was built, the country was experiencing a large surge of immigration from people wanting to come here and make a better life for themselves and their families. Hope for the future." "Sounds like it was marvelous. I only saw it one time, but I can still remember the feeling of awe, seeing her standing there in the harbor against the blue sky." She sighed to herself. "You would have liked it, Thor. Good architecture." Thor flashed a smile. "Oh, aye. I could tell by looking at that arm. That beauty must have been something else. When you humans put your mind to it, you'd really build some bloody great works." Dawn gave him a small smile as the ship moved past the beacon and into the harbor proper. She caught sight of a few smaller boats passing through the water. Some she assumed were part of the harbor patrol, based on the official-looking insignia. Others looked like fishing boats. The rest she couldn't think of what they were doing at night. A few more minutes passed as they drove through the water. They passed under the gargantuan suspension bridge to get to the IPD dock. Dawn took in the sight, well, as much as her human eyes could contain. Now that's new. That, lads, is the Grand Converse Bridge, Thor said proudly. Biggest suspension bridge in the Empire. Did you work on it? Oh, no, I wish. Me great-uncle Lorikin worked on her. Part of the cable team he was. He got at her hand with his. Look here. Look at her. 20 million tons of concrete. Well, 1,000 miles of solid cable. Took 60 years to build and over 2,000 dwarves working day and night. Triple ships. Next to Roost, it's our pride and joy. If she were a woman, I'd marry her. Be careful, dwarf, said Reese. You'll ruin your pants. Shoot it! He snapped before looking at the bridge. I'm admiring! After passing the bridge, it was another 15 minutes before they arrived at the IPD impound docks. One of the harbor patrols stopped along the side, presuming to figure out what they were doing. Once one of the officers caught sight of Lucas, a simple wave was enough to let them through without much trouble. It wasn't long before they were back in the warehouse where they set off from all those days ago. Engines off, anchors down. Ladies and gentlemen, we are docked, declared Jinx as he shut down the controls and brought the ship to a halt. There was a sense of relief amongst the crew as the ship stopped, almost like they were coming home from a long vacation. Groose gave a long yawn as he stretched out his limbs, finally free of the seasickness that plagued him. It feels good to be home, Thor spoke, removing his cap, scratching his head. Next time we get a job, Lucas, make sure it's not out of the country. No guarantees, said Lucas. All right, everyone, field trip's over. Unload the boat and head back to the office. I'll take a desk to Dr. O and have her check her out. See if he can't do something about the condition of hers. After that, we head back and see what we can do about the situation. Worried about our employer? Reese carefully said, not too much in front of Dawn. She didn't want to give her unnecessary anxiety. Hopefully, he'll be a bit more reasonable when we explain the circumstances. If you're positive. I have to be. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. Good then. It's just enough time for a round at the pub, Thor said. He then took Dawn's hand and patted it. Now don't you worry, lass. The doctor will take good care of you. Even if he is a wee bit odd. Dawn glanced at Lucas. Odd? Luke, he shrugged. You'll see. 2 hours later, Dawn found herself sitting at an exam table in a small clinic on the east side of Brooklyn. The wait wasn't as long as she originally thought, since there were a few patients there. There were very few patients waiting to see the doctor. She was given a small pre-exam by the doctor and now was left in the room with Lucas. During that time, she remembered what Thor said about him being odd. Dr. Ulysses Foster Osgood, MD. Dr. O was the nickname his patients gave him. He was one of the best doctors in the eastern half of the empire, visited by people from all walks of life. A talented physician, Dr. O had a masterful understanding of the various races and species that made up his clientele. In fact, many big hospitals in the empire wanted him on their staff, offering him salaries that many first-year graduates would kill to earn. But he turned them all down. He preferred the simplicity of his small practice. He was also a doctor who didn't ask questions about his patients, what they did for a living, and most importantly, how and why they needed to see him. Secrecy was his bread and butter. In fact, there was a saying about Dr. O around the city. As long as you can pay, he doesn't say. The main reason why Lucas Kane took her to see him. He wouldn't ask who she was, where she came from. So long as Lucas could pay, which he could do his job. But then came the reason why she remembered the dwarf's words. Lucas, from his seat next to the examination table, could see it in her face. The unsettled look that was on her face. The same look that many who see Dr. O for the first time. The door of the room opened and the doctor stepped in. He was dressed as a typical doctor, a white lab coat with his name sewn into the side, a brown undershirt, loose-fitting black tie, matching slacks, and white loafers. Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, except his face. Even looking at it again, Dawn couldn't make heads or tails of it. His hair was long and black, sticking straight up from his scalp. Almost like someone painted them on his skin like saplings. His skin was a strange shade of green, Not extremely green like broccoli, but light green, like jello. The skin itself didn't seem like skin at all. He was skinny, almost and thin, almost like silly dough pulled and stretched over his skull. His eyes were permanently large, or abnormally large and piercing. In fact, in the few minutes she talked to him, Dawn was certain that he hadn't blinked at all. There was an odor that came off of him, not offensive, but merely off-putting, certainly noticeable anyway. When he smiled, he showed entirely too much teeth, which were insanely white. He was odd, proper odd, like the textbook definition of the word odd.
Well now, how are you doing tonight?
Dawn tried not to flinch when he spoke to her. Even his speech was odd. He sounded like he was burping every time he spoke. It didn't seem like he was doing it on purpose, it's just the way he spoke. Dawn snapped herself out of staring at him to answer. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Good. Makes the exam easier.
He pulled out a small circular device from his pocket and scanned Dawn from head to toe. When he was done, he flipped his palm upward and called up a small hologram of her body. He looked it over with his unblinking eyes, making a few notes to himself.
Interesting.
What is it? Asked Lucas.
Seems to be in good condition, but blood work shows she's lacking a few key immunizations. Rare for someone her age to lack them.
She's from the Protectorate. Dawn looked back at Lucas. He nodded at her, hinting for her to go along with the story. Yes, I'm from the Protectorate. Just arrived. She lied as well as she could. She didn't even know what the word meant, or if that word meant anything. But if it meant that she hadn't answered any questions, or couldn't or wouldn't be able to answer, she had to play along. Dr. O passed an eye between them. He knew it was a lie. He examined enough people from the Protectorate to know the difference. But still, he didn't want to know.
If you say so,
he muttered before heading back to the cabinet that contained various different amounts of chemicals and medical vials. He removed a few of them, mixed them together, and placed them inside of a pen-shaped syringe. He returned and motioned to her to expose his neck.
This will pinch a bit.
He pressed the injection to her neck. Dawn felt the sudden chill that came along with the medicine entering her bloodstream. She rubbed the side of her with her hand as she pulled away. What was that?
Basic immunization and sterilization shot, he answered. Good enough to keep the nastier bugs you could pick up from your first visit to the Empire. Seeing as how you're from the Protectorate and all.
Dawn tried her best to smile for the lie. It's totally right. Lucas spoke next. Hey, Doc, about that other thing we talked about?
Oh,
he explained. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a handful of different pill bottles. With his rather long fingers, he began sorting through the bottles, reading the labels, and checking the contents. Yet he smiled that oh-so-toothy smile as he handed the girl one of the bottles.
Take one every 6 hours until the bottle is empty.
Wait, that's it? That's all there is to it? She asked incredulously.
Yep. Took me a while to whip up a batch. Don't get a lot of cases for such an old disease. Must be quite common in the Protectorate. Right.
Yeah, it is, she answered, not really paying attention to the doctor. Her eyes were focused on the bottle of pills in her hand. Lucas stood up and walked over to the two. Thanks a lot, Doc. I hope you won't say too much about this whole thing. Dr. O looked between them again.
If I do not know, I do not know,
he answered with his trademark smile.
I'll have to draw up a bit of paperwork. I will leave you two alone.
The strange doctor turned on his heel and exited the room. Lucas touched her shoulder to get her attention. You okay? Yeah, just a bit. It's just... He started. I thought it would be some major surgery or long-term treatment, but it's just a bottle of pills. A bottle of pills and I have my whole life ahead of me. Wonders of modern medicine. She looked up at him, blue eyes full of gratitude and warmth. Thank you. I mean it, thank you. He smiled back down at her. It's no trouble at all, Dawn. So what now? Like I said, after we sign you out, we head back to the office and discuss some things. What things? It would have to do with some details of the job, as well as the guy who hired me to find you. Before she could even ask for more details, Dr. O walked back into the room, his face now a twisted frown. Well, that was quick, Doc, said Lucas. Quicker than normal.
Didn't get a chance to get back to my office.
Just then, 3 men in tactical uniforms burst into the door behind them and advanced upon Lucas. He considered fighting back, but he left his guns on the boat, which were probably back at the office by now. He was tackled to the floor and suddenly found 3 barrels pointed at the back of his head. He looked over at the others. Dawn had her hands up, as another uniformed intruder had her covered. Dr. O was in a similar position. This was a bad situation. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and couldn't risk Dawn getting hurt. He had no other choice but to surrender to these men. One of them shouted out, "Clear," to the door. After a few more seconds, another person enters the room. Lucas recognized him immediately from his beret. He was the captain of the prince's protection team, the same one who accompanied the prince when they broke into his apartment nearly a week ago. "Lucas Kane," he barked, staring straight at the ground human. "By the authority of Vladimir Sepesh Dracula, the 6th Crown Prince of the Empire, I place you under arrest." "On what charge?" "Treason against the crown." And so ends chapter. That chapter, yeah. So, I'm looking at the stuff. Yeah, looks like you guys are enjoying it. Yeah. Yeah, that was a nice twist on the Bermuda Triangle. I was trying to. I actually in the notes I had for the story, I initially wanted the Clear Islands to be under Antarctica, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I saw a documentary on the Bermuda Triangle and was like, I can work with that. Yeah, and yeah, it was. Yeah, the boat made it back in one piece, Mike. I'm sure his brother's going to be happy about that. I already discussed this with Mike because I know Mike has read the book, and he did ask some questions. But I mentioned about the doctor, Dr. O. So anyone notice anything about him? Don't spoil it for everybody, Mike. Just I want to see what Devil and the others think. The doctor. Yeah, that's it. A breather to learn about the cast. Yeah, I did that as a small little breather chapter between all the action. Just learn a bit. Well, we got to introduce everybody because Dawn is the surrogate for the crowd, is the surrogate for the viewers, for you guys, getting to know everybody a little bit. But but yeah, the doctor's name is what gives it away. Dr. Ulysses Foster Osgood. Yeah, I'll just say this. Just do with with the names. Ulysses Foster Osgood. Work with it. Be right back. I'm gonna go take a quick pee and water break. And then we'll get back to chapter 6. We'll get to the next chapter. All right. All right, I'm back. Got some water. Yeah, Mike is right. Ulysses Foster Osgood. Yeah, when me and Mike hung out all those for my birthday all those months ago, and he asked me a bunch of questions about the book, and I brought it up to him, and he figured it out from the initials. He's like, "Damn, that's incredible!" Like, just gonna say, I'm not gonna say too much more about it. Ulysses Foster Osgood. I want to see if Devil can actually get it. Come on, Devil. You can get it. I want to see if you can figure it out. And if folks watching in the VOD, if you figured it out before this, leave a comment below the video. I want to see who can figure out what the deal is with the good Dr. O. You actually broke out the book so you can see it. Yeah, Ulysses Foster Osgood. I want to see if you can get this. Might take some. All right. Bingo. Yep. Tacos for everybody who got it. Yep, you that is exactly right, Devil. And thankfully the chat is not on the screen, so the people watching this have no idea what the hell I said. So, like I said, if you're watching on the VOD and you figured out the secret behind Dr. O, leave it in the chat. I mean, leave it in the comments below. I want to see how many people got it right. Yeah, I just decided he's face palming from not getting. Yeah, I just decided what's a good way to make him all the more interesting, and I just thought I just leave a hint right there in everybody's faces. It's okay, man. But yeah, thank you for getting it. Thank you. It's okay. It didn't show up because I don't have the chat on screen, so it didn't show up. You didn't have to, but thanks anyway. All right. Now it's time to move on to Hiromi's favorite chapter, chapter 7, and we're going there. That picture on the screen. We're finally going there. We're going to Castle Dracula. And there's gonna be one part where I'm gonna take a small break, and I just want to see everybody's reactions to a certain moment that's gonna happen. Mike, you already know what's gonna happen, so don't spoil it. I just want to see what everybody's reaction is when we get to this part. You'll know it. All right, hand in hand. All right, ladies and germs, let's get to chapter 7. A visit to Castle Dracula. 5 years ago. The Guardian selection process. For many Lycans in the Empire, those 4 words are the most important words they'll ever get to hear. It represents the ultimate achievement, the ultimate duty, the ultimate honor. For Lycans, serving the state has been something they aspire to do since the early days of the Empire. Serving either the IPD or the Imperial Armed Forces was a sworn duty they willingly engage in. 97% of the IPD is made up of Lycans, with another 56 making up the army. Very few Lycans actually have any other occupation, but it's not unheard of for some Lycans to prefer not to serve in any sort of combat duty. This is where the Guardian selection process comes in. Every few years, the members of the royal family search the Empire for individuals who can serve them as their guardians, which is just a fancy term for bodyguard. A guardian is to protect the Dracula royal family. Well, not all of them, really. You see, each is assigned only to one member of the family, and thus charged with protecting that singular member. Oftentimes, a royal may select as few or as many guardians as they wish or deem necessary. The current record for most guardians belongs to the 8th Princess Wilhelmina, daughter of the 2nd Emperor, who had 20 guardians during her lifetime. There are certainly a few guidelines. There are certain guidelines that were a Lycan to be considered for the position of guardian. A Lycan must have served in either the Imperial Police Department, the Imperial Army, or the Royal Navy. A Lycan must have served in their selected branch for a set number of years, 5 for the IPD, 7 for the Army, and 9 for the Navy. A Lycan must have a spotless record, not a single black mark on the record for any reason. A Lycan must have performed his duties above and beyond the call of duty. Only the best will be considered. To be a guardian is a great honor for a Lycan. It is a title that represents honor, duty, and most of all, absolute loyalty to the crown. A title that grants one power and authority equal to the royal family themselves. One would be considered immensely lucky to even be considered for the position. Then why is it in this small, featureless interrogation room was Officer Lieutenant Akira Barbosa sitting down with the sourest of expressions on his face? The young Lycan sat in his black police officer's uniform, his sidearm holstered and his fingers interlaced at the table. He sat straight and rigid, barely moving a muscle, and with good reason, for he was about to be being watched like a hawk from the other side of the two-way mirror in the room. He knew he was being watched and by whom, and while his face told the story of a man who did not want to be there, he was still an officer, and thus kept his composure for those who watched. The door opened, and in walked a middle-aged vampire in a clean black suit and tie. "Good day," he greeted with kindness, an envelope under his arms. Akira nodded politely to him. "I do hope I haven't kept you waiting." "No, sir," he answered with all the discipline he could muster. The vampire sat opposite from the Lycan and opened the envelope to retrieve a few pieces of paper. He set them down in front of him on the table, making sure to keep them in order for his purposes. "Let's see," he muttered, searching for the papers. "Here we are," he said after finding the right one. "Ah, Akira Barbosa. Rank, Officer Lieutenant, is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you've been with the IPD for 7 years?" "8, sir." "Ah, my mistake." He continued to thumb through the files. "Let's see here. Very clean record. No disciplinaries or black marks. Very good. Says here you rose to your current rank faster than anyone of your graduating class. Impressive." "Thank you, sir." Interesting. Seems you were involved in the infamous Brookway chase a few years ago." "I was in the area, sir." "Humble. Cited for bravery at least 5 times. Awarded Hannibal's Claw twice. That's the highest citation an IPD officer can earn in the line of duty." "Just doing my job, sir." "Of course you were," he commented. Rather distinguished family you come from. 3 of your uncles served and died in the war. Father's a police chief, and then there's your other uncle. Rather famous, or should I say, legendary? Shame his career ended the way it did. I am proud of my uncle's service to the Empire, sir." The vampire didn't miss the slight edge in his response. He made a mental note of that. "As we all are," he said, putting down the papers and looking at Akira. "Officer Lieutenant Barbosa, even from the little I've read here, it is obvious you're an exceptional officer, head and shoulders above your squad mates in Precinct 5. "Thank you, sir. I will tell you this in much in all honesty. As an interviewer and proctor for the GSP, I have never seen a more deserving person for the position. I've interviewed at least 50 different candidates just today, and I can honestly say you are at or near the top of those 50. I believe if you were to become a guardian, you will become the best of this generation. Maybe the best we've ever had. Thank you, sir." The vampire leaned forward, a quizzical expression on his face. "But here's the question," he began. "I've been doing this for nearly a century. I've seen guardians come and go, but they all relished the position. They all loved it. But you're different. You're the first candidate to turn down the position, is that correct?" "Yes, sir, it is." "Is there any particular reason why you aren't interested?" "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted." Akira glanced at the mirror, presumably at his hidden watches, before he spoke again. "My family has served the Empire for generations. 3 of my uncles did die in the war. My grandfather was police chief, succeeded by my father, and of course, my other uncle. All I've ever wanted to do since I was a cub be a cop. It's in my blood. Continue. And I'd rather spend my days being a cop than being... He glanced back at the mirror and found his resolve. A babysitter for a bunch of royal brats. Excuse me? The vampire looked at him as if he had grown a second head, but Akira was unfazed. I could do more good for my emperor and the empire if I were a cop. While others may see it being a guardian as some marvelous opportunity for honor and prestige, I see it nothing more than a prison guard serving the whims of brats. Officer Lieutenant, you do realize those words can be considered at the very least offensive, the very most treasonous. I am aware, sir, but these are my honest and truest feelings. And if they disqualify me from this position, all the better. The interviewer looked utterly horrified by what he just heard. He quickly glanced between the Akira and the mirror, seemingly unsure what to do at the moment. He quickly gathered up all the sheets of paper and scrambled to his feet. I think that will all be all, Officer Lieutenant. You may stay here until otherwise ordered. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. The interviewer rapidly left the room, leaving Akira all alone and somewhat stewing. Back against the door, he steadily began to calm himself and regain his composure. He'd need this for his next part. He strode over to the door that was next to the room and cautiously walked in. There were only two occupants, a man and a woman, both watching from the other side of a two-way mirror. The man was dressed in a black and regal suit and covered in a large cloak that covered his shoulders. The woman wore a similar cloak, but a hood covering her face. Highness, he spoke before speaking again. Please forgive me. I had no idea he would say all such things. I take full silence. Prince Vladimir VI spoke before holding up a gloved hand. Your apologies are not needed. Only your assessment. The interviewer straightened himself out. Of course, Highness. He cleared his throat. As I said in the room, he is very qualified. His record speaks for itself. He would be an excellent guardian. If only he were opposed to that idea, I see, commented the prince as he stared distastefully at the lichen. And the others? The interviewer reached into his pocket and produced a few more sheets of paper. Out of the 300 I interviewed, I believe that these 10 would be suitable for you, Your Highness. I shall look them over later and make my choices. Excellent, Highness, he happily said. And him, sire? He is skilled but lacks tact. It will be most displeasing to have such a willful and disrespectful person as a guardian. Total disservice to the crown. I can get over the smart mouth in deference to his family and his record, but if a cop he wants to be, then a cop he shall remain. I shall break the good news to him, sire, he said, turning around and heading out of the room. No. The two males turned to the voice of the single woman in the room. She never took her eyes off the glass, always looking at the lone lichen in the room. It was almost like she was hypnotized by some unseen force from the other side of the glass. She reached up and pressed her gloved hand to the glass, as if trying to touch him. I want him. And with that, Akira Barbosa's fate was sealed with those three little words. His career as an IPD officer had come to an end, and thus began his career as the sole protector of the Emperor's only beloved daughter. Present day. Akira Barbosa marched on the upper tiers of Castle Dracula, his black boots echoing around him. It was 8 a.m. when he arrived at this section of the castle. He had woken up 2 hours previously to make his rounds, even if he wasn't necessarily needed to do so. The castle watchmen were enough to do such a task, but Akira never rested on his laurels and insisted on doing at least one lap around the castle before beginning his duties. He adjusted his dark blue uniform as he walked, the visible symbol of his status as a guardian. His long black hair was styled in a somewhat small ponytail that stopped at the collar of his uniform. His sharp brown eyes scanned the immaculate surroundings and the shiny floor beneath his feet. He made note of everything, looking for anything that seemed the least bit off. There was no way he could memorize the placement of every object in every part of the castle. He was thorough, but not that thorough. The place was simply too big, even for elves with their prodigious mental skills to do so. Coming out of the corridor was a group of 10 ladies walking in perfect step with each other, dressed in purple and white maid outfits. They were members of the Persephone Corps, the castle's housekeepers. They bowed respectively to Akira as they passed. He returned the gesture before continuing on his way. His lichen ears picked up the giggles and whispers amongst the maids, talking about him and how he looked in his uniform. Many of the females and a few choice males did find the young guardian most attractive, with his neatly kept hair, dark skin, and piercing gaze. Dashing would be the word to describe him. He turned the corner to make his way down a marble corridor. The long hallway led straight to the quarters of the royal family, which were his eventual destination. Standing now on either side of the hall were two members of the castle guard, fully decked out in dark brown uniforms and assault rifles. Both men saluted as he passed, with him returning the gesture towards him. "Guardian Barbosa!" Akira turned his head to see someone advancing towards him. "Captain Stewart?" He greeted the vampire coming up to him. Stewart was the commanding officer of the wall guard, noted by his gray uniform. He quickly gave a quick salute, which Akira returned. "I was hoping to run into you this morning." "Well, you're lucky to find me here, considering the size of this place. Your report?" The captain handed him a hollow pad with the nightly reports on it. Stewart didn't really need to report to Akira in any way, but years of diligence and the respect for the lichen resulted in him saving a copy of the night duties of the wall guard for him. He scanned the screen for various logs that were jotted down and any incidents that were reported. "Anything new?" "Nothing really," he reported. "A few guardsmen in the south wall got sick from some tainted blood." "Deacon's brand?" They know about the recall order, but you know how they are when they get their blood. Their own fault, I suppose. Akira then handed the pad back to Stewart. "Everything looks good." "Thank you, sir." "Would you like to do an inspection of the wall?" Akira shook his head. "Not today. The Emperor's called for a meeting for his children. I'm on my way to wake up to inform the princess." "He's a heavy sleeper." "Don't I know it." "As you were, Captain." "Guardian?" The men headed off on their separate paths. Stewart back to the wall and Akira to the living quarters. Upon exiting the corridor, the Guardian reached the beautiful dark hallway that made up the living quarters. Just as he was about to start down this hall, he ran into another person, a dark blonde lichen in the same uniform as his, meaning she too was a Guardian. "Guardian Alexa," he greeted, politely. "Guardian Akira," she replied. "Back from your rounds?" "Yep. On my way to wake His Highness. You?" "Just coming from His Highness's room. Unfortunately, he is occupied at the moment." "My?" Alexa gave a curt nod. "He certainly does love his room service. It is not our place. Our place is not to judge, only protect. But we can comment." "Of course." "You told him about the meeting?" She sighed to herself, crossing her arms under her rather ample chest. "Not yet." He gave her a questioning look. "Standing orders for Guardians. No interrupting when he's spending time with Mai, even if the apocalypse happens." "How long does he usually take?" 1 hour. 2 if he's feeling frisky." I almost feel bad for her at times, seeing her limp around the castle with that goofy smile on her face. "Jealous?" "Please," she said with a sour expression. "Not interested. He knows I'm not the type of woman, and I'd break his arm if he tried, prince or not." Part of him didn't believe her, since she is a long-time admirer of His Highness, but he wasn't one for idle gossip. "Fair enough. What about you? I heard that a lot of the Persephones have a running pool about who can land you in bed," she said with a playful smirk. He cracked a smile. "Not interested." "Fair enough. I should let you go on your way. You'll have your hands full with the princess." "I'm used to it." "Alexa? Akira?" The two Guardians parted as Akira walked deeper into the quarters. It wasn't long before he reached the gold-covered doors that belonged to the princess. As he neared, the door creaked open and a Persephone slipped out, broom in hand. "Oh, Guardian Akira," she squeaked. She quickly fixed her brown hair as the man in question walked up to her. I didn't expect to see you this early." "It's okay," he said. "It's a bit earlier than I normally arrive. Official business and all. You're Sophie, aren't you?" Yes, sir," she stuttered, trying not to be flustered in being the presence of the man that the Persephones called the most handsome man in the castle. "You're new, aren't you?" "Yes, sir, I am. I've only been here for a few weeks." Akira tried to keep from smiling at her shy, awkward nature. He had to calm her down before the poor thing exploded from anxiety. "Cool yourself, Sophie. There's nothing to be nervous about." I know, sir. I just don't want anyone to make anyone mad or make a mistake. He placed a hand on her shoulder, causing her to jump slightly, but then settled down. It's a big job, I know. Just do your job, do it well, and everything will work out. Sophie took his words to heart and proceeded down to calm her down her nervous state. Also, this being this close to him didn't hurt either. Thank you, sir. No problem. So what are you doing in there? Oh, she looked at the closed door, again wondering if she had made a mistake. It's my turn to clean the princess's chambers, but she's still asleep, he answered. I figured as much. It's so dark in there I couldn't see anything, and when I tries to rouse the princess, she just mumbled something and went back to sleep. Please, sir, don't tell my leader that I didn't clean the room. It's fine, Sophie, he said. I'll tell her the situation so you won't get into too much trouble. The girl's face lit up like an All Saints' Day tree. Thank you, sir, she exclaimed, fighting off the temptation to hug the guardian. No need to thank me, he said. Now off you go. You've got work to do. But what about the princess? I'll deal with her, he lamented. It's my job, after all. Of course. Good day, guardian. Good day, Sophie. He watched the young girl bow to him as she pranced off, a new confidence in her step. He could almost hear her swooning as she retreated down the hallway. Just great, he thought to himself. I made another fan. He didn't hate the particular attention he got from the Persephones, but at times it did get it a little out of hand. More than a few times he found a little extra love notes or extra flowers on his bed after they cleaned his room, which was right next to the princess's. More than once he found a pair of ladies' undergarments placed under his pillow. He never found out who did it, and he didn't really ask. How they felt about him with their own business, so long as it didn't interfere with his duties. Speaking of which, he looked back at the door. He knew what was coming. It would be a chore for anyone else. But it was a chore that he was good at. He has a rather unique way of waking up the princess. With a sigh, he opened the door and walked into the pitch-black room. Immediately, the smell of perfume and honey lotion filled his powerful sense of smell. It used to bother him to no end when he started here, but after 5 years of being her one and only guardian, he adapted to the various aromas from this room. He closed the door behind him, not wanting any passers-by to peek in and view the room, even in the dark. His eyes adjusted to the dark as he peered around the room, 2 large closets to the left containing her massive wardrobe, a large vanity mirror to the right of the door with various grooming instruments on it. The walls were covered with red swirling wallpaper of finest quality. The floor was covered in rich elven carpet that felt like cool water to the bare feet. And sitting in the center of the room was a luxurious queen-size bed wrapped in dark red sheets. And wrapped up in like a caterpillar in a cocoon was the princess, breathing ever so lightly and her head resting comfortably on a large cloud-like pillow. Anyone else wouldn't have dreamed of disturbing this picturesque, tranquil beauty. Akira Barbosa pointed and laughed at such people. Princess, wake up, he said softly. It's time to get up and rule the day. That was the standard greeting that his trainer told him to say if and when he needed to wake a member of the royals. Very soon he had come to learn it didn't really work when it came to her. Princess, the day beckons you. He walked over to the large curtains-covered window and undid it, allowing some morning light into the room. He looked back at the woman. She turned and stirred, but remained in her slumber. He let out a growl as he marched over to the foot of the bed. Wake up, you damnable brat! He roared as he grabbed the sheets and violently pulled them off her form. Can't believe we have to do this every damn morning, he snarled as he stared down at her. Now, many a man in the Empire would kill to be in Akira's position at this moment. Why, you asked? Because the princess slept naked, completely and utterly nude, and it was a sight that greeted him every morning for the last 5 years. The Princess Elandra Maria Vanessa Dracula was beautiful. No, the word beautiful doesn't do her justice. Princess Elandra was a goddess. When the lords of the vampiric houses talk of vampire perfection, they talk of her. Her skin was pearl white, as if it were chiseled from solid marble. Her long locks were a delightful mix of sky blues, cloudy whites, and mellow grays. Her figure was slim but athletic, thick and thin at the same time, and and her eyes were a pale, were pale blue, beyond the illusion, giving her the illusion of blindness. Altogether, it made her the envy of every woman and the dream of every man. She had been courted by men from nearly every walk of life in the empire: dukes, duchesses, wrestlers, captains of industry, war heroes, pimps, cops, and criminals alike. But she turned every one of them down, and anyone who worked at the castle knew why. Princess Elandra's eyes fluttered open a little as she threw off the chains of slumber. She groaned a bit as she sat up in the bed, cracking a seductive smile as she cast her eyes on our guardian. Good morning, Akira, she said. Only good because you just woke up, he snapped. That and the fact that the first thing I get to see when I wake up is you. That's only because the only person aside from your father and brother who can wake your lazy ass up, he said as he began to fold the sheet. What time is it? A little past 8. That's early, she noted, rolling around the bed. You normally let me sleep another hour, at least an hour later. True, he said, but your father is calling a meeting. He wants you and your brother to see him at the throne by midday, and since it takes so long to get your behind moving, I had to come early. Elandra sat up quickly and looked at him with eagerness. Oh, Akira, she said, you do look at my behind. The young Lykeling gave her a withering glare, which did not affect her at all. At least not in the way he intended. Giggling to herself, the princess pulled herself out of bed and strolled over to the large window of the nearest to her bed. With a dramatic flair, she flung the curtains wide open, exposing her bare form to light. Soon her skin began to smoke upon the contact with the light, but instead of scrambling for cover, she seemed to indulge in the sensation of her skin burning. Now that's better than coffee.
Damn it, brat!
Rocky raged as soon as he saw what she was doing. He quickly stomped over to her dresser and picked up a pen syringe from it. At least put on some block! She slowly turned and faced him, a seductive smile cladding her face. Hands on her hips, she strutted out over the light and towards her guardian. Puppy, 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 she purred. Are you worried about me? Akira growled loudly, flashing his sharp canines. He hated that nickname. Hated it 5 years ago when he started this job. Hated it still, no matter how good it sounded coming from her mouth. Only because I don't want to catch grief from your brother, he explained. Put it on. You do it. It wasn't an order. It was too low and personal to be called an order. It's more of like a request. She was not more than 3 inches from his face, looking up at the taller man, her face neutral but warm. She stared directly into his eyes, pale red meeting her dark brown. He looked down at hers, his innermost hostility and grumpiness having given way to indirect gentleness and patience. It's in these moments Akira was painfully aware of how completely gorgeous she was. His Lycan instincts told her to take her, to throw her back on the bed and ravage her with all the animalistic fury he could bring to bear. And she would let him. She would let him have his way with her any way he wanted. She could see it in those big, dazzling eyes of his. His fury and control were fighting a seeming eternal battle when such moments came up. Wordlessly, he brought the syringe to her neck and injected the needle into her skin. Once the fluid had entered her blood, he quickly removed it. A pleasant smile broke on her neutral expression. Good boy, she said, patting him on the cheek before walking away. Akira snarled at her actions. Elandra walked over to one of her dresser closets and opened the doors. Now, she announced, what to wear? Something official? Not too alluring. I am seeing father, after all. Just put anything on, he grumbled. Anything would be good. Aw, she said, poking her head out of the closet. Do you think I look good in anything? Akira rolled his eyes. You know what I meant. She let out a haughty laugh. Oh, Akira, you need not be so uptight. Learn to relax, she said. Preferably in my bed. Akira groaned as she vanished into her closet. This was going to be a long morning. The The subtle hum of the ether drive engines of the aircraft woke Dawn from her half sleep. Sorry. Bit of tooth. Rubbing her eyes, she readjusted herself to her surroundings. She was strapped into the somewhat comfortable window seat, the crisp mountain scenery passing by. She looked at her right. Lucas sat beside her, eyes closed, missing his trademark duster and sporting a minor cut on his forehead from when he was tackled to the floor. She looked around the cabin. They were surrounded by the black-clad soldiers, 12 in number, all seated and all with their eyes firmly trained on them. She didn't have time to ask who these men were or why they were arrested them, but she remembered what their leader said. Treason against the crown. She looked back at Lucas. He didn't seem like a man who could commit such a crime, but then again, he was a stranger in this new world. And there was still much to learn. You awake? Dawn looked back at Lucas when he spoke. He looked at her with a single open eye. I thought you were sleeping, she said. Nope. He opened his other eye and gave a stilted yawn. Oh, just resting my eyes. You look like you were sleeping to me. Because I'm a great actor. She knew what he was doing and she didn't really care. Dawn was scared by this whole situation and a little humor was enough to ease her fears. Who are these men? She asked. See those patches on the sleeves? They look like a red D. Dawn looked at them again and sure enough, she saw the patch in question. Those are the marks of the Imperial Special Forces. The Dragon's Teeth, they're called. They're shock troopers, highly trained, use the best weapons and gear, and answer only to the royal family. When any member of the royals ventures out into the public, these guys are usually around. Though I wouldn't make any sudden movements. These guys can and will kill you if they pose a slight threat. Does this have anything to do with that guy the beret said about you and treason? Lucas carefully ran his hand through his hair. Probably, but I didn't commit any treason, he answered. Not willingly, anyway. Luke, she said, eyeing him suspiciously. Well, I didn't have much choice. Explain it to me, Dawn demanded. You see, he started. This has to do with that talk we were going to have back at the office. It had to do with the person who hired us. Who? The prince. Wait, as in the prince? The prince of the empire? That's the one. It took a few moments for her to process the information before she spoke again. Okay, so a monarch asked you to look for a cryo unit and you get arrested? It had to do with what we did, he said. We weren't supposed to open the unit. It was a condition of the job. We were just supposed to retrieve it from the pirates, bring it back, and hand it off to the prince. But then it got damaged and you had to wake me up, she finished. Well, I guess that could be considered treasonous in a way. So how bad can it be? The punishment, I mean. Well, at the very least, I could lose my freelancer's license and maybe see some jail time. At the very most, execution. You could be executed? She exclaimed. Oh, no. That's to be the most extreme they could get, but I don't think it will get to that. If we get an audience with the Emperor, we could plead our case, have it thrown out. But only if we can catch him in a good mood. How often is he in a good mood? Lucas hunched his shoulders, giving her a weak smile. Dawn looked out the window, now full of dread, sense of dread filling her being. Things were far more serious than she had originally thought. Just then, the cockpit door opened, and the squad captain stepped out, pulling the attention of everyone in the cabin. We'll be landing to the castle in 5 minutes. Prepare yourselves for landing, he barked. The rest of the troops fastened their seatbelts and stowed away any loose bits of clothing and equipment that might come undone in the landing process. Dawn looked down towards the ground, hoping to catch a glimpse of the castle or the landing strip, but all she saw was rugged mountain ranges and unsettled lands. It didn't seem like the place for the home of the monarchy. It doesn't look like there's a place we can land at. You're looking the wrong way, Lucas called out. Look up a bit. Her eyes drifted up from the ground and towards the horizon. It was then that she noticed something off in the distance. Something floating. She focused on it now, trying to figure out what it was she was looking at. It seemed like a giant weather balloon, but part of her knew it wasn't. As the aircraft got closer towards it, she began to make out distant objects in and around the mass. It was only when they had gotten close enough to get into a holding pattern around it that she could finally see what it was. It was a castle. A colossal castle. A colossal floating castle. This was Castle Dracula, the ancestral home of the Dracula family and the seat of power for the Grand Vampiric Empire. I'm not sure if I could accurately describe the grandeur and magnificence of the structure, but I should do my best to do so. Castle Dracula was once located in a small country formerly called Romania, now part of the Protectorate. When the empire was founded, the first emperor demanded the castle be moved to the empire and serve as his home. With the aid of some elvish engineers and dwarvish architects, the castle was moved brick by brick to its new home, thousands of miles away. Over the millennia, the various members of the Dracula royal family have made additions to the existing structure until it reached its size to this day. The first thing people noticed about seeing the castle for the first time is its size. It is immense, easily the size of several city blocks, 15 if I had to guess. It was a tad bit cluttered, but not messy. Even with the add-ons from the various monarchs of centuries, the architecture remained fluid and symmetrical in its Gothic design. Sharp spires and angular towers reaching upwards. A mess, but a glorious, marvelous mess to behold. Circling around the whole of the castle was a large gray wall, studded with guns and parapets over the edges. Dawn could see many men in gray uniforms standing along the perimeter of the wall. They were the wall guard, the ever-present watchmen who guarded the castle from outside threats, though she couldn't imagine what kind of threats could assail a giant floating castle in the sky. As the plane moved around the castle, she could make out a few features: a decently sized courtyard, long halls of bright white stone, something that looked like a chapel, arching bridges that spanned over the sections of the building. The tallest point in the castle was a tower with a protruding section that seemed to be connected by a small corridor off the main section. It didn't seem possible to be in a position like that, and it was still structured soundly, but she didn't seem to question it. Just across from the main tower was the second tallest point in the grounds, a tall clock tower. Even from her seat on the plane, she could almost hear the clanking of the gears and the hands of the clock. From the face, she could see the entirety of Castle Dracula, with very few places to hide from the watcher's gaze. Another thing she noticed was a small ring of floating bits of land orbiting around and above the castle. It seemed almost like a crown on the head of this place. Altogether, this made Castle Dracula one of the 7 wonders of the New World. Even enemies of the Empire couldn't help but marvel at this pinnacle of imperial architecture. Just when Dawn thought she had seen every inch of the palace, something new caught her eye. She had been in this world for a few days. Many things caught her by surprise and left her in astonishment, but for the first time since she had awakened from her 1,000-year slumber, Dawn Jackson felt awe. Unmistakable, undeniable awe. Maybe it was from the emotion of the moment. Maybe it was a need for emotional support, or maybe she just felt like the enormity of the castle would swallow her whole if she stared at it too long. But for whatever reason, Dawn Jackson's hand immediately found Lucas's and wrapped itself around his in a tight grip. Lucas looked down and started to slide his palm free from her grasp, but seeing her transfixed stare and hitched breath, he thought better of it. He wasn't one to just let anyone touch him in such an intimate way, but for her, he could make an exception. The plane circled around the castle for a few more minutes before coming to a vertical landing on the pad just in front of a giant drawbridge. As the engine shut down, the troopers unbuckled and on their feet, guns ready. Up, one of them ordered Lucas and Dawn. They obeyed, undoing their buckles and getting into their feet. Lucas exited first, followed by Dawn. The girls faced the sudden chill of the high winds. The air was a bit thinner than before due to the castle being so high up, and the combination of that and the winds gave her a mild sense of vertigo. She wobbled on her feet and would have fallen if Lucas hadn't caught her by the arms to steady herself. "You okay?" "Yeah," she answered. "Just getting my bearings. Just a little dizzy." "Move," barked the captain, who was standing a bit ahead of them, and motioned for them to move into the castle. They walked together until Dawn was able to walk on her own. The castle was even more imposing up close than it was on the plain. The drawbridge that connected the landing port to the main part of the castle seemed to be the oldest part of the castle that she had seen, but it didn't seem too worn or rotten. The bridge was 20 feet long and made a dark red type of wood, which with giant gray chains connected to them. After crossing the bridge, the pair and their armed entourage entered the castle entrance. It was a long hallway with high ceilings and tall windows on either side. The walls were covered with beautiful tapestries, emblazoned with the symbol of the royal family, and beautiful frescoes that looked to be centuries old. There were fine tables of vases and small statues placed on them. The air smelled clean but old, denoting the regal nature of it all. Dawn had to stop herself a few times from wanting to look around, almost forgetting that they were not guests but prisoners. The sound of a chorus of footsteps filled the corridor as a group of Persephones marched out in unison with one another. Dawn was mesmerized by their clean purple maids' outfits and their rhythmic steps. "Who are they?" she asked. "Persephones," said Luke. Basically, they're the maids of the castle. They look more like an army troop. They kind of are, in a sense. This castle's so big, it literally needs an army to keep it clean and running. Are they dangerous? Lucas laughed a bit. No, just keep out of their way and let them do their jobs. As soon as they approached the grand staircase that led to the other parts of the castle, the stairs were gigantic, with steps lined with blood-red carpeting and rails that were lined with gold and diamonds. Dawn wanted to see what was up there, but the party took a sharp right, away from the stairs. She wanted to see more of this place, but sadly she was in no position to ask for a tour. Walking down another long hallway, she passed by some guardsmen along the way. They came to a small room with a dark brown door. The captain stopped behind the Persephone, who was standing behind the door, as if waiting for something. Just before Dawn could ask what they were doing, there was a loud rumbling sound that came from within the room. As chance would have it, she looked down at the threshold of the door and saw a large flash of purple light erupt from it. Just as suddenly as it began, the strange event inside the room had ended. The Persephone then took hold of the door and opened it. She quickly turned around and gave the captain a small nod before closing it behind her. Like before, the sound and lights came and went. The captain then opened the door and turned to face the group. "Alvarez, Condi, Long, with me. The rest of you back to the barracks." All but the named 3 of the troop quickly gave a salute and stood where they were. Lucas, Dawn, and the named 3 entered right behind the captain. Upon entering, saw that the room was small, with green bricks inscribed with weird symbols she didn't recognize. On both sides of the room were 2 gold stands with big green orbs on top of them. She quickly scanned the room as the door closed. The Persephone was nowhere to be found. There was no sign of any other door or passage that led outside the room, save the sole door. The captain then placed his hand on the other side of the door, and whispered the words, "Top floor." "Dawn," spoke Lucas, "this is going to be a bit strange for you since this is your first time. No matter what you see and what you hear, I want you to breathe normally and do not panic. If you have to throw up, you can, but only when it's over." "After what's over?" All of a sudden, the green orbs around the room began to hum and glow. The symbols on the wall began to illuminate as well. Before she could ask, she looked down at her arm. The hairs were starting to stand on ends. There was a feeling of static electricity that began to surround her. She looked over at Lucas. He was calm as can be, his hands in his pockets. The other 4 in the room were just as calm. The humming got louder and louder until it was almost deafening. She suddenly had a distinct feeling of weightlessness around her, like she was falling from some great height. Then, the purple flash. As soon as it was ended, Dawn collapsed to her knees and began to violently cough. Her stomach felt like a mule kick while wearing grenades on its hooves. Her vision was totally unfocused. It felt like the lower half of her body had crumbled to pieces, and she felt like she had been thrown into Antarctica in winter while wearing a swimsuit. Needless to say, Dawn was not having a good time right now. Lucas leaned down and wrapped his arms around her, rubbing her back as she heaved. "It's okay, you're okay," he whispered over and over again, but she couldn't really hear him over her discomfort. He half carried her out of the room, followed closely behind by the captain and his troopers. He sat her down in a convenient chair outside the room near a window. "Get up. We must be on our way," ordered the captain. "Give her a few minutes," Lucas said. "It's her first time." Doesn't matter. Get up and move, he barked. Lucas rose to his full height, eyes drilled straight into the captain, and a voice low and dangerous. Give her time. The captain took a suspicious step back. He was no stranger to threats. He was captain of the Dragon's Teeth for a reason. But this was something that took even him aback. Before, he only saw Lucas Kane as a lazy buffoon who spent his time blowing his money on old-world junk, but now seeing him look him right in the face, he saw the reasons why this man had survived and thrived in an environment that only lichens could. If he took a step towards the girl, if he showed even an ounce of malice towards her, Lucas would have been on him, and probably killed him. He knew better than to tempt fate, so he took another step back and gestured for them to stay where they were. Dawn's vision settled, and her body slowly began to right itself. Nothing felt broken or out of place, so she was okay, save for the crappy feeling she was experiencing. What was... she gasped out. It's okay, happens the first time for everybody. Happened to me too when I went in. It'll clear up in a bit, he answered. After about the next 3 or 4 times, you won't even notice. Notice, she panted. What was that? Look out the window. What does that have to just look? Willing herself to move, she looked out the window as she was told. After a few seconds, her eyes began to adjust to the light. She understood why he asked her to do this. They were no longer in the castle entrance. Instead, they were high above the entire castle itself. Dawn could see everything around the castle, every little detail, structure, or element. How? Lucas pointed his thumb to the room they just left. Teleport chamber. She stammered. As in matter teleportation? Yep. You guys mastered actual teleportation? I wouldn't say mastered, Lucas said with a chuckle. Wait, if you have that, then why the need for boats and planes and cars, she asked. Easy, because it's kind of junk. Dawn looked at him quizzically. A few centuries ago, some mage scientist cracked how to transport matter from one place to another. Don't ask me for the details, I'm not a tech guy, he said, holding up his hands. They could only teleport stuff from one chamber to another, but there was a problem. Accuracy. Accuracy? You see, they learned that the farther away the 2 chambers were from each other, the less accurate it would be. A few miles between them, no problems. Hit the double digits, that's when things get a bit messy. After that, the tech wasn't approved for general use by the public, but they found a better use for it. The palace. That's right. They created a sort of short-range system within the castle. Makes getting around this place a lot easier. All you have to do is enter the room, say where you want to go, and boom. Sure beats walking around this place for an hour just to get somewhere. Never ceases to amaze me, she commented. We weren't even close to getting it, just theories and unproven tests. The captain stepped forward after watching their exchange. Are you 2 finished? Dawn, strength returning, tested her legs. Shaky, but at least she could stand up. Lucas gave a thumbs up as he stood up with her and followed the captain out from the chamber. Soon they arrived at a long set of stairs that led upward. The group climbed until they reached a set of grand doors with the Dracula royal family crest on it. The captain opened the doors, and the group walked into the throne room, the highest point of the castle. The throne room was the best looking and best kept part of the castle that Dawn had seen. To one side hung a few well-crafted portraits of what seemed to be past emperors, all in bold colors. Dawn mused they must have been painted by a master artist that could give Da Vinci a run for his money. The other side of the room was covered in elegant stained glass, depicting a scene of near religious connotations. In the center was a long dinner table, covered in white lace, dotted with precious silverware. At the far end was the throne, seated high on an elevated platform. To one side, a banner with the crest of the family. To the other, the insignia of the empire itself. It was only after she had taken in the shrine to the monarchy that Dawn noticed that they were not the first people there. To the side of the room stood a tall, well-dressed vampire. He wore a black cloak with a blood-red bee sewn into the back. Under the cloak, he wore a white dress suit with red tie, a red rose in his lapel, and a blue scarf around his neck. His hair was short and jet black with flecks of gray in them. His skin was a pale brown, like leaves on an autumn morning. He looked up at them with deep red. He looked at them with deep red eyes, and cold and hard like granite. And he sniffed the air. His face turned to absolute disgust. "Humans," he said in a deep voice. "In the throne room? How utterly appalling." From behind him came another vampire, this one smaller than the former, about the same height as Lucas. Save for a gray tie, he wore almost nothing but black. His hair was black too, long and pulled into a ponytail. He had a dour look on his face that was borderline depressing. He adjusted his glasses before he spoke. "Uncle, they seem to be accompanied by the dragon's teeth. Maybe they have some business with His Highness." The large vampire's arm shot out, backhanding the small vampire hard. He flew backwards, hitting the hall with a sudden thud.
"I have eyes, nephew,"
he rumbled. "I need not your observations to show me what I can see with my own eyes. Know your place." The small vampire struggled to get to his feet and picked his glasses from the ground. "I understand. Please forgive me, Uncle." Dawn was tempted to say or do something after witnessing the sudden violence, but considered the way the vampire looked at her and Lucas and his displayed strength and speed, she thought better of it. "Is he the Emperor?" she whispered. "Oh, no," replied Lucas. "He's not the Emperor. He's a house lord. One of the rulers of the major noble houses that support the Emperor. He's Alvis Bathory, honored Duke of the Empire and Lord of the House Bathory. You can already see what kind of guy he is. The little one is his nephew, Eric. You can tell what kind of relationship they have." "Captain," Lord Bathory announced, pointing to Lucas. "He does not look like one of the kitchen help." He then pointed towards Dawn. "And she does not look like a Persephone. So why are there common-born humans in this most noble of places?" The captain was unfazed by her questioning. "The two humans are here at the behest of the prince. The Emperor has demanded to see them and his son for this." "It does not excuse them from being here," he roared. "As a Duke of the Empire, I demand they be removed from my presence." "Need I remind you, my lord," he said, "I nor my men answer to you or anyone else. We follow the orders of the Emperor, and only the Emperor." Lord Bathory's eye twitch was with barely strained contempt. He deeply considered physically forcing the captain to follow his orders, but such things were beneath him. "Bah! Have it your way," he snorted. "If I had my way, I would have you lashed within an inch of your pathetic life, and those commoners would be thrown off the castle without grab chutes." "You are not the Emperor. I am." The voice dropped like a nuclear bomb, shaking the nerves of all in the room. It was so loud and powerful that the stained glass window shook a bit. All eyes turned toward the throne at the end of the room. Seeming coming from the shadows was a towering behemoth of a figure. He walked over to the group, but each step felt like a stomp of a giant. The stone floor seemed to shudder in terror at the approach of this person. Dawn could finally make out his appearance as he walked into the light. He was dressed in a dark blue dress shirt with a red undershirt. Around his neck was a white cravat, tightly tied. At his feet were brown boots with thick soles. Billowing behind him was a cape, black on the outside but deep crimson on the inside. The red seemed so shiny and wet that it seemed to drip like fresh blood. His hair was bone white and stuck straight up. His eyes were red like Lord Bathory's, but far more intense and menacing. Dawn looked around. Lucas, the troopers, Bathory, and his nephew were all on a single knee, bowing respectfully to him. Lucas looked back up at her and mouthed "kneel" to her, which she did not even hesitate to do. She assumed well enough that she would be in the presence of a forceful being, and did not want to anger him. She looked over at Lord Bathory. Gone was his haughty arrogance and noble bearing. He was as meek and as helpless as a 3-week-old kitten. She could even spot the terror sweat on his brow. He was afraid, and he was right to be. Even if he hadn't announced it just a few seconds beforehand, or even if if anyone told her, she would have known just by looking at him. This was Vladimir Tepesh Dracula V, the absolute emperor of the Grand Vampiric Empire. He casually raised his palm. Everyone rose to their feet. The Emperor turned to Bathory. Lord Bathory, did I hear you try to order my captain to do something? The Lord smiled meekly before the Emperor. My Emperor, I was merely suggesting to do something about the humans in the throne room. The humans are here at my behest, Lord Bathory. It is not your place to say who belongs in my throne room. But sire, he stammered, why meet them here? You could have met them somewhere else. The chapel, for one. The humans would have liked that. There is a situation that has arisen that requires my attention. They are key to that situation. Where I meet them and how is my business. My business alone. It matters not to you. But my Emperor, such things are unheard of. Surely you can—
Lord Bathory!
He bellowed, stomping his foot on the floor. The impact of such caused the entire room to shake violently. Dawn nearly fell off her feet if Lucas hadn't caught her in time. The rumbling cycled through the room and the entire castle. A mere outburst was enough to shake the entirety of Castle Dracula. Such power, such fury. Dawn realized the true reason why he was emperor. It wasn't because of political maneuvering or favor from the nobles, or even because his last name was Dracula. It was simply because he was powerful. She hadn't seen many vampires before today, but she could honestly say that this one, the Emperor, was unconditionally the strongest vampire in the Empire. He looked up at Bathory like a parent, would a child. Lord Bathory, he spoke with a deadly calm. As I said, this matter does not concern you or your house. I will deal with the humans as the situation demands it. And if they are guilty of what they are charged with, he looked directly at Dawn, they will be punished by me. Personally. Even him talking to her was a drowning experience. Her lungs forgot to breathe. Her heart forgot to beat. Her mind forgot to think. He could kill her with the same level of effort one would take to swat a bug on her arm. She felt utterly helpless before him. A higher being. The superior predator. On your way, he ordered. I will speak on this matter another time. Lord Bathory's face was incredulous. But my lord, I am no longer in the mood to deal with you today. Leave! Or my mood sours even more. The Lord tried to get out another reason for him to stay, but the glare from the Emperor was enough to tell him that he was no longer in the mood to talk. He gave a defeated bow before speaking. As you will it, my Emperor. Come, Eric. He turned around and shot a nasty look at Lucas and Dawn before he and his nephew exited the throne room. Now, for you two. He turned his attention to the humans. Captain, leave us. The man in question looked up at his sovereign, surprised by his words. My lord, are you sure that is wise? The day has not come when I cannot handle two humans. I will be fine. Being the loyal soldier he was, he offered a bow. As you will it, my Emperor. He gestured and the other three troopers, and together they exited the throne room, closing the door behind them. Dawn was now alone with the man who saved her life and the most powerful being she'd ever seen. She knew Lucas knew how to handle himself in a fight based on the weapons he had around him in the boat, but fighting the Emperor, he didn't feel too safe right now. The Emperor approached Lucas, his face hardened, a hardened mountain of power. Lucas stood him firm, unflinching in the face of his sovereign of the nation. She wasn't so sure what to say or do in this situation. She was utterly lost. Now then, Vladimir started. Are they gone? Yes, sire, Lucas answered. We're all alone. We're all alone. She dreaded what was about to happen next. Were they going to fight? Should she run and hide? Her answer came when the Emperor spoke again. Oh, thank the gods. Unbelievably, the faceless Emperor changed in a way she hadn't expected. All the menace, all the terror, all the power had melted away like snow in a volcano. His posture relaxed, his eyes softened, his frown transformed into a goofy, childish grin. I can do this now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small blue portable gaming device. With glee in his eyes, he flipped it open and proceeded to play on it. Had to pause it when Bathory showed up, right when I entered the next dungeon. Lucas stared at the screen. Which one? He asked. The fourth one. I'm going through a hobgauntlet. Oh, I'm past that part. There's gonna be nasty up ahead. Shh, don't spoil it. Dude, I won't spoil it for you. Just saying the boss is no joke. If you're underleveled, he's gonna wreck you. I know. That's why I'm grinding hobs. Wait, are you using a quick sword? Yeah. A quick sword sucks against that boss. It's the best weapon I have. But what about the old sword? You mean that piece of junk the beggar sold me? But it sucks. You have to grind it up first. Head to the graveyard and kill some zombies. It'll level up fast. Really? Is that good? Plus 45 strength and plus 25 dex. One of the best weapons in the early game. Huh. Well, I can always come back. I'd do it if I were you. Thanks for the advice. Gives me something to do. The Emperor laughed as he walked back towards the throne. Dawn's mouth was left agape. She couldn't wrap her head around what she had just witnessed. The monster of a vampire that very nearly scared her to death was replaced by a giggling gamer. There wasn't a single ounce of menace coming off of him. Honestly, it reminded her of a little cousin who used to love video games and begged her to play with him. Eyes wider than saucers, she looked over at Lucas, who was now just sporting his usual lackadaisical attitude. Lucas, she stammered out. Is he? The Emperor? He said. Yeah, that's him. He's cool. But, is there a problem? Vladimir said to them, a welcoming smile on his face. Oh, it's nothing. She's just not used to the whole... He explained, pointing to his face with his finger. Vladimir's face brightened in realization. Oh, he exclaimed. Oh, I'm so sorry about the earlier, the threatening you thing. It's a public thing. I have to act like that for the public and the nobles. Better keep a strong face, Dad would say. I really don't care for the whole, grr, I'm the Emperor, listen to me or I'll kill you, grr, thing. Frowning makes my face hurt, but it comes with the job. Dawn's fear was now replaced with a feeling she couldn't quite describe. It's like she arrived at her friend's house. It was like she was invited over at her friend's house. He was very hospitable. It's, fine, I guess. Ah, very good. I didn't feel comfortable threatening a lady, Miss Dawn Jackson. He took her hand and kissed it. Ah, pretty name for a pretty woman. Now come along. Let's see if we can't fix this whole mess and get you two on your way. That son of mine, he sighed to himself. I can't believe he arrested you for treason. What was that boy thinking? He strode lazily towards the throne, moving and jerking his body as he played his game, with the two humans trailing behind him. You never told me you were friends with the Emperor, Dawn said. Well, we aren't buddies, he explained. We just happen to know each other. This is the castle a few times in the past. Only because of your service to the crown, Vladimir pointed out, not taking his eyes off the game. What kind of service? Nothing much. Vladimir craned his head back towards them. Nothing much, he asked. Why, the things this man has done, the deeds he's performed for the greater glory of the Empire. My dear, you're missing out on some tales about Lucas here. Like what? She asked, eager to learn more about the man next to her. The Emperor waggled his finger. It's not for me to say. Lucas, really, tell the girl some stories. I can see she's hungry for knowledge. This brought a smile to her face. The first smile she's shown since he entered the throne room. Yeah, Lucas, she jabbed. You should tell me a few stories. I didn't come here to get tag-teamed by you and the Emperor. Phrasing, the Emperor called out. And that's the part I wanted to see what you thought. Yep. Yeah, that's the Emperor. He's not that's not a stand-in, or he doesn't have personality disorders or anything. That's the Emperor. And it always surprised everybody by the fact that he can go from intimidating to being just a big goof. That he is. He's a big goof. I wrote that twist in a long time ago, and it's always surprised everyone who read it. Like, why did you write him like that? I'm like, It's funner that way. Most powerful emperor, the most powerful vampire in the empire, being an absolute, being a weeaboo, or a nerd, or pretty much everything you can describe. Yeah, yeah. Mike already knew it was coming. He was just waiting for for the guys' reactions to it. Yeah, everybody says it's amusing. I just wanted to see your reaction, so let's keep going. They reached the end of the room, and thus Vladimir ascended to the short steps to his throne room and plopped himself onto it in the most unroyal fashion possible, what with his leg hanging on the armrest and all. Just then, a small door opened up next to the throne, slid open, and out crawled a black and white creature that resembled a fat weasel with stubby legs, claws on each paws, thick loose skin, and a tail covered by hair. "Ah, good morning, Rupert," the Emperor called out to him. The creature gave a snarl as it trudged over to him. "Are you hungry?" He reached into it next to a container next to the throne and produced a small orange melon. The Emperor lobbed the fruit at the creature, who caught it in its claws and began to tear into it. "Is that a honey badger?" asked Dawn. Yes, he is," he answered. "Picked him up on a small family trip in the Midlands a few years back. I call him Rupert. Say hi, Rupert." The animal gave a toothy shriek. "He's so adorable," Dawn squealed as she advanced to the little creature. I wouldn't do that if I were you," Vladimir warned. "Rupert is not too fond of new people. He will probably—" He stopped his warning when he saw Dawn freely pet Rupert, stroking his fur and tickling his skin. And even more surprising, Rupert was letting her do it. In fact, he seemed to be enjoying the attention. "Well, that's interesting." Dawn looked up at the Emperor. I'm good with animals. Can't really explain it." Vladimir looked over at Lucas. He merely hunched his shoulders and said, "Who knew? Well, I'm not going to complain. If Rupert is happy, then she can play with him as long as she wants." Dawn smiled as she petted the Imperial pet on the stomach. "So how long are we sticking around?" Lucas asked. "My crew is going to be wondering what happened to us since we didn't have a chance to call in or anything." Of course," Vladimir said. "Such a rude thing. I'll have to teach that boy of mine how to treat guests." "That would be hard to do, Father. You know how stuck in his ways he is." All eyes turned to the grand doors and the sound of the new voice and the view of the entrance of Princess Elandra and her lone guardian. She was now properly dressed in the delightful one-piece dress that wrapped around her neck, showing off a bit of her cleavage. Her seductive but authoritative walk was not missed by anyone, least of all Akira, who walked a few steps behind her, more likely giving him something to watch if he was indeed watching her wiggle her backside. Lucas tried not to stare, but his experience with the princess was that if she wanted your attention, she had it. So Lucas tried not to stare too much while in the presence of the Emperor. And speaking of the Emperor, "Ah, there she is," he exclaimed. "My little girl." Don't get up on my account, Father. You'll spoil your concentration." "Ah, but what kind of father would I be if I didn't spare a moment or two for you, Elandra?" "Only a moment or two, Father." "What's this? We have guests?" "If I knew that, I would have had worn something special for the occasion." "An appearance from you, Highness, is always special." Lucas spoke as he gave her a bow to her as she neared. "Still the charmer, Lucas Kane?" "I do all right." "Indeed." "And who is this?" "Your girlfriend, perhaps?" She gestured towards Dawn. The girl in question stood up from playing with Rupert and gave a quick bow. She was awestruck by this woman, the picture of refinement and beauty. Her older sister Serena was a model in wild crowds and magazines from New York to Paris, but even she couldn't hold a candle to the princess before her. She was suddenly hit with a wave of self-consciousness, like she didn't feel like she was worthy to be in the same room as this woman. But Elandra extended her hand to her. Dawn could see no ego or arrogance or vanity in her eyes. Mere acceptance. Warm comfort. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" Forgive me," answered Lucas. "Dawn Jackson, this is Her Royal Highness, Elandra Maria Vanessa Dracula, daughter of the Emperor Vladimir Dracula V, Princess of the House of Dracula, and second heir to the throne of the Empire." A pleasure," Dawn stuttered, like a fan meeting a Hollywood starlet for the first time as she shook her hand. "Of course. but anyone who is a comrade of Lucas Kane certainly has higher standards. And another thing, her father calls out, Rupert likes her. Elandra turned her surprised eyes upon Dawn again. Well now, she started. That makes you all the more interesting. Dawn wasn't sure how to handle all the sudden attention she was receiving from the royals. It's not every day that royalty takes a keen interest in you. Akira, don't leave dear Lucas in the lurch. Hadn't dreamed of it, Highness. Lucas smiled. The Lycan smiled wildly as he approached him. Akira? Lucas looked at the Guardian closely before he broke into his own wise smile. Akira! It is you! Took you long enough. Ah, come here, you cub! The two men closed the gap between each other and embraced in a tight hug, laughing heartily. I barely recognized you in that uniform and all. Still getting used to it myself. Been 6 years since we last saw each other. Wow, 6 years. Where's the time go? You don't want to know. Anyway, what are you doing here? Some mess with the prince. Hope it gets cleared up and I can get out and we can get out of here. The princess cleared her throat. Lucas, don't be rude. Introduce the girl to Akira. She looks a little bit lost. Lucas turned towards Dawn with a questioning look as she had been wanting to know what something was, but not sure how to ask. Oh, where's my head at? He chastised. Akira, this is Dawn Jackson, a colleague of mine. Dawn, this is Akira Barbosa, guardian to the princess, and my nephew. Nephew? She said. Lucas nodded as he slapped a hand on his shoulder. She unconsciously looked between them and noticed it right away. They looked nothing alike. There wasn't a single feature about them that was in any way showed that they were in any way related. Lucas was slightly smaller, thinner than Akira. The Guardian seemed bigger, stockier than his uncle. Their hair color was completely off, their eyes were too different as well, and she was sure she saw long canines when he laughed just now. Was he a vampire too? A comparison between them and the princess was shown that he wasn't one either. Just another part of the mystery that her savior, Lucas Kane. But for now, she greeted, pleased to meet you. The handsome guardian shook her hand. His grip was powerful, but not enough to cause her discomfort. Dawn thought he must be a powerful man to have such a grip. Any friend of Uncle Luke's is a friend of mine. It was odd for her to hear someone refer to him in such a way. There was a story here, but it would have to wait until this current predicament was over. Ah, glad to see you children are getting along so well, said the Emperor. Speaking of which, where is your brother? He might be a bit late, Father. He's having some room service last time I checked. He rolled his eyes at the news. And he thinks he's being so slick about it. If he's going to be the next Emperor, he's going to have to be learn a bit more about Steph when it comes to his meetings with my... Why, Father? Are you saying you dallied with a few Persephones? She asked playfully. Before I met your mother, he answered, and no one ever found out. 20 minutes elapsed before Prince Vladimir VI made his way to the throne room, straightened out in his outfit as he walked. Just behind him was one of his 10 guardians, Alexa, a muted but sour expression painted on her face. He quickly surveyed the room. His father was lounging slothfully on the throne, playing his game. His sister was seated on the floor, playing next to Rupert alongside a blue-haired human. Thought it strange that Rupert would let anyone outside the family play with him. He must have guessed that she was the person inside the cryo unit. He would have to deal with her soon. Close to them was Akira and Lucas, chatting about something. He didn't really care. Apologies, Father, he announced, catching the attention of everyone in the room. The meeting I was in ran long. I'm sure it did, he replied, half believing him. You know, son, if you really should give poor Maya a raise, the girl does work hard. The Prince Vlad stiffened while adjusting his collar. I have no idea what you're referring to, Father. Of course you don't. He said in a tone that had not the single iota of him believing his son. Now, Vlad, what is all this mess about treason and the like? You've inconvenienced poor Lucas here, and as well as his new friend. The prince looked over at Lucas. The human gave him a cocksure smile and a little wave. He then looked at Dawn. Her appearance and posture were neutral as she was gauging him as much as he was her. Father, Lucas Kane not only violated the conditions of the job I hired him for, but doing so jeopardized my investigation and threatened the security of the Empire. And what exactly did he do to earn such a distinction? He turned to face Lucas. He opened the box. The Emperor looked up from his game. And did you? Lucas motioned over to Don in response. Vlad dramatically pointed his finger to the human. You were ordered to return the box that was taken by the pirates and specifically told not to open it. Do you deny this? Obviously I don't, answered Lucas, but I had no choice. There is always a choice, he spat. You knowingly and willingly disobeyed my orders. The unit was damaged beyond our ability to repair, Lucas snapped back. If we hadn't opened it, we'd be heading over a dead body. The life of the occupant matters not. We would have learned just as much from a dead body as a live one. Hey! Dawn snapped, her normally serene blue eyes filled with anger. I have a name, you know, and I don't appreciate you talking to me in such a manner. I will talk to you in any way I see fit. Lucas had to hold her back from nearly attacking the prince. Not that she would get far with Alexa being there. How very rude, brother, Elandra said. Dawn is a very nice girl, if you must know, and Rupert would be very cross if you upset his new friend. Her threat was punctuated by a hostile growl from the honey badger. He continued, Rupert's mood notwithstanding, considering the circumstances, I demand Lucas Kane be arrested and the girl placed under my jurisdiction for examination and possible interrogation. And what in the seven hells could she possibly know? Lucas asked incredulously. What she does and doesn't know is something I will find out. Father, my request is valid for my investigation into a private matter. And that private matter wouldn't happen to have something to do with the death of Professor Blackthorne? Vlad the Younger's face was a portrait of shock. Father? Oh, please, son. I was aware of your little investigation as well as your trip outside the castle a week ago to hire Lucas to get your little box. But how? I was so careful. The Emperor held an expression of wise astonishment. My dearest and oldest son, there are two things you need to learn about being me. One, very little goes on in this castle without my knowledge. And two, I've been sneaking out of this castle since I was a child, and I've never been caught. Vlad gave him a look that could only Vlad gave him a look that only a child would give their parent if they said something they thought was a little unbelievable. You can't be serious, father. The Emperor held up his game. Where do you think I got this from? Got it the day of release. Stood in line for 2 hours in front of a very talkative wood sprite. Wore glasses and a fake beard. No one knew. Whether that's true or not, it doesn't change my position. I had to do something. You weren't doing anything. Wasn't I? You got the news the same time as me. You know how it looked. It wasn't suicide. I had to do something, he exclaimed. It was like you didn't even care. His last comment seemed to have struck a nerve. From just then, all the merriment drained from his face like water from a bathtub. Eerily calm, he closed his game and placed it on the side of the throne. He then looked at his son, placing his fingers together. His words were low but stern. He wasn't as menacing or fierce as he was before, but he certainly wasn't joyful or silly either. It was no coincidence that I selected Blackthorne to be your teacher, son. On one of my many secret trips outside the castle, I happened to run into him at a poetry slam. This was before either you or your sister were born. We met, we talked, had tea and burgers together. Wonderfully brilliant man, so easy to talk to. But he was still a grad student with aspirations of being a professor. He was overwhelmed by the workload, said like he didn't feel like he had what it took to be a proper professor. I told him this: if you become a professor, I will hire you to tutor my firstborn son. He laughed it off, but I was very serious. A few years later, he earned it, and I kept my word. Now, son, you didn't know all this, so I will forgive you for that last comment. But don't even think for a second that I didn't care when I heard news that one of my friends had passed away. And now to think that he might have been murdered. He spoke. As he spoke, the room started to shake. Not as violently as before, but certainly enough to worry people. I take it all very seriously. Young Vlad and Elandra were taken aback. They had seen their father's mask of all-powerful emperor, but this one was different. This was fury. Cold, barely restrained fury. They all felt like they were on the edge of a volcano, waiting to erupt and utterly decimate everything within a 50-mile radius in a fiery wave of earthly destruction. And they were frightened. Glad I got that off my chest. And just like that, he returned to the jovial, personable sovereign they had all come to know. It's quite the tonal whiplash, to be sure. Vladimir popped to his feet and descended the throne. Now, as for your request, I'm afraid I'm going to have to deny it. But father, he said, waggling his imperial finger at him. No sass, young man. Whatever counter-argument the prince had was unput under finger. And thus, the formerly proud and regal prince was reduced to the countenance of a 13-year-old who had just been told he couldn't go out with his friends. Yes, father, he relented. Now, as for you, he said, turning to Lucas. Well, the situation has changed since my son hired you, Lucas, so I have a bit of good news and a bit of bad news. The bad news is that, unfortunately, under the imperial powers and authority of my office, I must render your contract with my son null and void, which includes your fees for your services. I am so very sorry. I was expecting that, Lucas said, a bit saddened. Sensing it, Lucas reached over and put his hand on his shoulder. And Dawn reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. Lucas, it's okay. But your money. You were looking forward to that money. And what about the others? How do they get paid? Dawn, it's fine. Really, this is better than fine. How is it better than fine? Simple, he answered, his smile brightening. Because I can't work 2 jobs. Dawn's face asked a question without even needing to utter the words. It's part of the freelancer's charter. I can't work 2 jobs at the same time. Can cause a conflict of interest. So he freed me from 1 job so he can hire you for another. Dawn answered in realization. The Emperor laughed. Oh, quick on the uptake, this one. Oh, try keeping her around, would you? I'll try, he said with a wink. But yes, that's a bit of good news I wanted to tell you. I'm officially hiring you for a job. That's what I like to hear. So, what's the job? The Emperor placed his hands behind his back as he spoke. The job is twofold. First, I want you to officially investigate the death of Professor Blackthorne. If it's murder like we all believe, I want you to find the parties responsible and bring them to justice. If you require any assistance beyond manpower, it will be provided to you, but don't expect too much. The nobility? Asked Lucas. Just as my son surmised, I believe the culprits are members of the nobility, and thus makes any movements into this matter very sensitive. Hence why I haven't sent in my own investigators to really look it over. Is that why you threw out that Bathory person earlier? Asked Dawn. Well, that and he was being a real smeghead, Vladimir answered, being a bit of smugness leaking out from his words. Before this little get-together was about to kick off, I needed him out of the way. If anyone could pull this off, it's one of the high houses. Now I need to know why. As I said, you will be provided with as much aid as I am able. Akira, please provide him with a cell phone with a private line. Don't want anyone else listening in. That we do it. As you will it, Highness. Good. Now, for the second part. I want you to protect this young lady. Dawn pointed to herself. Me? Yes, you, my dear Dawn, he said, taking his hand in hers. I know this is difficult considering your situation, but this is the reality of it all. You are at the center of a very violent storm. I don't envy you having such weight on your pretty little shoulders, but your safety is now paramount. For some reason, our mysterious third party has gone to great lengths to get you, and now you must be the key to their plans, whatever they are. Besides, I would hate to see anything happen to you. Rupert would be ever so saddened. The honey badger strode over and rubbed against her bare leg. I'll try to keep her safe, Highness. For Rupert. The Emperor turned back to Lucas. Well, now, those are the conditions. Do you accept? He offered a hand. Do you even have to ask? He replied, giving it a firm shake. Excellent. Now, I do love it when things work out like I think they will. Father, did you forget something? The Emperor turned towards his daughter. His fee. He's not doing it for free, you know. Ah, oh my, he exclaimed, slapping himself on the head. Silly old Emperor. I'd forget my head if it was detachable. So, name your price. Don and Lucas shed a laugh. I'll call you with a price, sire. Good, good, he blurted. Well, if that takes care of anything, then, daughter of mine, please escort them to the landing and call up a lift for them to get home. And, are you hungry? Dawn felt her stomach grumble a bit. I guess I am kind of hungry. Ah, then take them by the kitchen and have the cook make them something to eat. Maybe a sandwich? Yes, a sandwich is nice. Of course, father. Of course, father. Elandra took Dawn's arm. Come along, dear. We'll take you. We'll take the scenic route. So I can show you more of the castle. I'd like that, she said as she was being led by the princess. Also, it will give Akira time to admire my backside, she whispered in his ear, causing the blue-haired girl to blush crimson. Akira, with his hearing, heard every word she said and growled. She turned back to him and said, Am I wrong? He snarled a bit and turned his head away. Satisfied, she led Dawn down to the grand doors. She sure is forward with you, commented Lucas. You have no idea, Uncle Luke. Lucas slapped his nephew on the shoulder. Come on, you can tell me all about it on the way. Together they followed behind the girls and disappeared through the grand doors. Guardian Alexa, could you leave us alone for a bit? I'd like to speak to my son for a few minutes. Vladimir ordered the female Lycan. As you will it, my liege. She saluted both men and left the throne as ordered. The Emperor paced around the room a bit, Rupert following behind him loyally. Are you angry with me, father? Vlaya said meekly. No, I'm not angry. Just disappointed. Did I not do the right thing? You had the right idea, son. You just went about it the wrong way. The wrong way? You were on the right track, but you needed more stealth, more subtlety, ingenuity. Merely sneaking out and throwing your weight around is pointless. If you ever wish to sit on the throne after me, my son, you will need these skills to not only rule effectively, but deal with the high houses as well. Who do you think's behind all this? He walked over to one of the stained glass windows and looked out at some unseen object on the horizon. I do not know. I can't say who it is, and I don't want to give you any ideas about who I suspect, but it is troubling. They've been planning something for quite a while, everything perfectly placed. And I think Lucas's involvement has changed their plans. How do you know? Call it a hunch. Even the best laid plans go to pot if a single chaotic element was introduced into it, and that's what he is. And for that, I commend you for involving him, son. Thank you, father, he said. Do you think he can find out who did it? You know his background, son, and about who he is before he was a freelancer. He will find out, but... But what? Vladimir took a thoughtful pose before answering. Ever since I first heard about his death, something has been off. If their objective was just to kill him, there were better ways to do it. No, they wanted him found and questions to be asked, but by us specifically, like a trail of breadcrumbs. Why didn't you not tell Lucas Kane about your suspicions? The Emperor gave a curt chuckle. Knowing him, he already knew them. If not before, then now. I'd rather him figure it out from the shadows than us figuring it out in the open. That's just the kind of person he is, and sadly, we need that kind of person to help us survive what's coming. And if he doesn't, we stand to lose. Lose what? Everything. And so ends chapter 7 of our dear story and our formal introduction into the Dracula royal family. And yes, Mike, that was a Red Dwarf reference. Had to work that in somehow. So now we have now Lucas has a new job. A lot of it, they do have some connections to old world Japan. You'll find a lot of families in the Empire do have some Japanese inspired names. A good chunk of Lycan families do have roots in old world Japan, but not anymore. So that's why they have those names. A lot of names are just passed down from generation to generation. They don't look Japanese, they just have Japanese ancestry in them. Probably from the human side of their family. So there's that. But yeah, it's a fun cast to see. And now that you've seen them all, Devil, you can go to the author notes and you can see all the pictures and how they look if you haven't seen them already. They're in the back of the book and you can see how everyone looks, and hopefully they're just like you imagined. As a warning, the next few chapters will be yeah, the name is a bit weird. The Empire is just a big melting pot of different cultures and different ideas just melting together in just one big pot. Yeah. But yeah, those are the main cast, and you can watch them. And if you want to know how they look, those viewing on the VODs, just get a ebook copy of my book, and you can skip all the way to the author's notes, and it will show you the characters and how they look. Commissioned by my personal artist, very good artist, and I'm very proud of them for the work that they did on the entire thing. It was well worth the money. The next 2 chapters are going to be very, very chill, very mellow. And all I can say is in the next few chapters, we are going to get to know Lucas's dear family. Yes, like Devil said in the screen, buy the book. It's $8 on Amazon. Can't beat that. Yeah, won't be disappointed. If you're liking what you hear so far, just buy it and we can read along with it so you can get to the twists and turns. So next time, we're gonna be doing some relaxing and meeting Lucas's dear adoptive family. I want to thank everybody who joined out in the chat: Mike Shell, Hairball, LPH, Devil, of course, Card Junkie, and a few others I might have missed. Sorry. So if you have any comments, questions, I will leave a link in the pinned comment below where you can buy the link to buy the ebook copy so you can read along with me. So until next time, next Tuesday, same time, it's been Shintigercurl, that dude in the straw hat, saying good night and enjoy yourselves.